was a little girl I only knew what was read to me, the stories untrue. It was in vain and then not in bed. It's just stories so I told my head. But when I met you, I just knew all those stories were about to come true. They were reading to me every night. Oh, hoping one day that I would get it right. Oh, I'm a fool for you. La da 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 da. The stories they told me each and every night, they were only stories, fairy tales of crime. I'm just a fool in this afternoon delight. Every night in bed, it's just a story I told my head. 'Cause I'm just a fool for you. La da 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 da, you. 'Cause they were reading to me every night. Oh, hoping one day that I would get it right. But I'm a fool for you. La da 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 da. I'm a fool for you. La da 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 da. Since I was a little girl, I only knew what was read to me, the stories untrue. It was ingrained every night and bed. It's just a story, so I told my head. But when I met you, I just knew all those stories were about to come true. But they were reading to me every night. Oh, hoping one day that I would see that light. Well, I'm a fool for you.
Little ambient noise, yeah.
So now you're grabbing some band lab clips.
Now for me, that would also be something where I would use like volume automation and like bring that from the bottom, like bring it in and then bring it back out. Kind of.
And these are the kinds of sounds you can stretch. With this AI, like stretching it actually can be cool.
Oh, that was perfect for the interlude too.
Ends it right in the
I
right
didn't
spot.
even notice 40. I didn't even realize the texture faded out at the interlude until it happened. I'm like, wait a minute.
Sometimes you just, it was just meant to be that way. And welcome back.
And it's that time again.
Start it up again. Getting back to it on a Thursday. We already have people in the chats over here. Got Mackenzie over on Facebook. What's happening? We got Supersonic here sending in a link here. Not doing links at this point. Possibly later, just like Tony said a minute ago here. Send it over to Angified. Maybe she'll check it out later. And maybe we'll look at things later in the show. But typically Thursdays are not a link show. We're usually doing our talking and playing and stuff.
Yes, and if we are going to take links later, we're going to evaluate the songs. So only send something if you are going to be serious about getting evaluated. If you want some feedback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we're happy to give feedback. But most of the time, we're busy teaching and talking about stuff that we've learned or new resources that we found. That's another big one is we find all kinds of great stuff on YouTube and we bring it to you guys in a consolidated fashion so that we can kind of learn as much as we can, get it all together, and try to work
and
it out from there.
if you do happen to have a song that relates to something we're talking about, these are the links that will get our attention during those moments.
Yep.
So we're going to be
Absolutely.
looking at a couple things, and if what you have, your track, relates to some of the things we're looking at, by all means, let us know.
Mm-hmm. And Ominous decided to give him a link. I like it. Now, one thing that we can look at also later on here is we're looking at some of these graphics resources here. This, for example, these are some of the things that I'll just find on some of the YouTube channels I go to. This one came from High Country Guitar. The name actually cut off at the bottom here, but I have it on the other one. And basically, this was for a jam track. So they had a jam track for Uncle John's Band, a Grateful Dead song, and in this case, it's in G major. So they have it listed as G Ionian, and we go from there. And it basically gives you the 5 caged shapes, the 5 pentatonic fingerings you would use that are related to those shapes, and the Ionian fingerings where these fit in. And kind of you can see how to jump from one to the other and how to use them all in your solos, use them all in being able to move around the neck, play in different positions, and find things to play in those positions, and getting used to finding where the roots are, finding where essentially all the chord tones are, the roots, the thirds, and the fifths, for all of the places that you're trying to solo or play in.
Wow, you really get a lot of options with the Ionian, huh?
Oh yeah, yeah. And that's the thing, is that's the same as playing C major. So in this case, it's G Ionian, so it would be G major. So you're playing, 8 of the 12 notes. So it does, there's not that many gaps, but you can see how. One thing that's also I wanted to go into, actually, do I have that one? Yeah. This is one of the other resources that I'd found here. This was from Michael Pelletieri. Actually, Tony could probably pronounce that last name better than I can. But this is about building better guitar scales. And in this case, he's not naming the notes. He's not putting numbers on things. The idea is that there really only are 3 fingerings to have to, you can switch between all the modes using just these 3 fingerings. The one that's in red is like a 1-3-5. So you're doing, that would be like 1st fret, 3rd fret, and 5th fret. Or if you're playing at the 7th fret, it would be the 7th fret, 9th fret, and 11th fret. You're just playing relative position 1-3-5.
So as long as you're playing a red, a blue, and a green, you're playing something that's going to go together?
It's more that the red is actually playing. Let me show you here. On the guitar itself, we have the other camera, which would be easier this way. Yeah. So let me get the old camera up in here. What we're talking is like if we were doing one of those red ones, for example, if we were doing it at the 1st fret, 1-3-5. That's 2 reds next to each other, right? So it's a 1-3-5, 1-3-5. And if we were to then go to this one, it would be a 2-3-5. And that's
I see.
which are that 2-3-5. And then the green ones are 1-3. And once you get those 3 fingerings comfortable, so like if you don't know a theory, if you could just go with this type of a thing, you just get comfortable with 1-3-5 on a couple of different strings, because you can also play starting in Mixolydian, for example. If we were playing in B Mixolydian, we'd be doing 3 sets of 1-3-5s at the start. We do 1-3-5, 1-3-5, 1-3-5. And that would be the 5th one of these diagrams here, using over here. Just because confusing, but it's more to not get tied up about what key you're playing in or what note you're playing, but more to think about the notes relative to each other and how they're how they work together. But by getting these 3 sets of fingerings down, if you can get that 1-3-5, and you can get that 2-3-5, and you can get that 1-3-4, you get those 3 fingerings down, and you can literally play all of the Ionian modes with relative ease. Just a matter of and practicing to get them. But it's a good one. That one doesn't relate as much to the keyboard.
So all these suggestions, whether you're like soloing and bouncing around or you're forming triads, chords, all these suggestions work either way.
Yeah, basically the first one on the far left there, that would be major. So like if you were playing that at the 1st fret, that would be F major. If you were playing it at the 8th fret, that would be C major. So for C major, we would play 8, 10, 12, 8, 10, 12, 9, 10, 12, 9, 10, 12, 10, 12, 13, 10, 12, 13 on the guitar neck. That would be the frets. That's what it would look like on the tablature. And that would be doing that first position starting at the 8th fret. And then you would play, if you go to the next one, that would be Dorian. So you'd be basically sliding up to the next note. So instead of playing it in C, if you wanted to stay in the same home key, you would then play D, Dorian, and you'd be playing at the 10th fret. So you'd be going 10, 12, 13, 10, 12, 14, 10, 12, 14, 10, 12, 14, 12, 13, 15, 12, 13, 15 would be the way that, and then you go to the next one, and each one you'd be sliding up 2 frets and basically doing all the same notes, just playing them in the different modes. It's similar on the keyboard. We would be doing C major, and then D Dorian, E Phrygian. It's just all the white notes going from whichever note to the next note is how you would get there. And that's just again. And then whichever mode you're going to play in, if you want to play Mixolydian, you go to G Mixolydian, would be all the white notes. It sounds different because you're not using that F sharp. And that's the difference between G Mixolydian and G major, is that flatted 7th instead of. And that would be the difference there. But it's just one way to see how the different modes all kind of work together. And I know we get into modes a lot with different diagrams and things, and I have several diagrams up here for us to work with. But for I don't even think we were using that one's Mixolydian. Actually, let me go this way. Yeah, so that was again same diagram from High Country Guitar, and this has a link at the bottom there. But the idea is that with each of these, they're showing the 5 different cage shapes, the 5 pentatonic fingerings, those, and the diatonic finger that you can work your way through on the guitar on these. To do it on a keyboard, I usually just kind of relate everything back to C major and A minor so that I can just get everything back to all the white notes and work with it from there. And that makes it easier to digest. And then you can translate to whatever key you're actually going to play in after the fact.
Yeah, these are useful charts. High Country Guitar, you said?
High Country Guitar, yep. And it's actually in the
good find.
In the bottom here. Yeah, he's great. He's got a lot of really good jam tracks. And he's a Deadhead, so a lot of Deadhead, Grateful Dead jam tracks, a lot of Fish jam tracks, stuff like that. That's right up my alley. So for me, it's a lot of fun stuff. And he's a great player too. And these jam tracks, they sound really good. They're not just I mean, not to downplay MIDI files, but some people, they'll just take MIDI, not put any love into it, and just say, here's a jam track that I made. But when they actually work at it, whether it's MIDI or whether it's real instruments, sound as good as you can. That's really what gets a quality jam track going.
Yeah, and that's typically what,
and that lets you.
What's lacking typically in the MIDI translations is the love, like putting in that extra dynamics and nuances that MIDI by itself sometimes falls flat.
Yeah, exactly. And it all comes down to how much love is put in and in what ways. Everything shouldn't be the same velocity, for example. Otherwise, it just sounds like someone's hammering away at the keyboard. It doesn't sound like there's any nuance. It doesn't sound like a person playing. It sounds like you programmed a robot to go blam 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 blam.
Yeah, velocity is the big one that typically the MIDI files that you'll find don't have a lot of dynamics in the velocity. The drums are just all at 127, which that's not what drums will sound like typically. There's sometimes a drummer hits harder, sometimes it hits softer.
Mm-hmm. Yep, got to have that nuance in order to get it all in there.
Yeah, and there are some filters and tricks that good MIDI programmers will use to just say randomize the drums between 90 to 115, and the filter will just kind of randomize it.
Yeah, I always liked when
humanize it.
Yeah, exactly. When they went from, you had quantize, so you can get everything much more mechanical or much more on the grid, and then you can humanize to stray a little bit away from the grid, put a little bit of randomness to it, so that it does sound more like a person playing rather than a machine that's just on on every single beat.
Yeah, and that's especially important when it comes to like drums. A
Hmm.
little bit of off time. No human drummer plays perfect unless they're
Hmm.
Neil Peart. And even
Yeah.
he would occasionally like purposely play imperfect.
Yep. Yep. Oh man, I love Neil's playing.
Well,
Always inspirational.
he was the closest to a machine for me
Hmm.
back then.
Yeah.
Before there were drum machines, there was Neil.
Yep. Yep. My buddy had gotten one of the I guess it was probably right time that HD started being more common, having video in higher definition than it used to be. And they had some error correcting software that they were using, noise removing software, visual noise removing software to get noise out of the video. And they actually edited out his sticks. His sticks were moving so fast that from frame to frame, the software was just like, nope, there's nothing there. That was just an artifact because nothing moves fast enough to not be there a 30th of a second later. But it was just
You watch some drummers.
yeah. They had to edit the sticks back in so that you could see them. Otherwise, they just kind of vanished, and he's just it looks like he's just kind of waving his hands at the drums and making noise.
And the same thing happens with guitars sometimes when I'm seeing some of these guitar videos that, like James, watching him play.
Yeah.
You need a fast camera to capture his fingers.
Absolutely. Me, I still play like I'm much more of a slow player, much more jam band stuff where we're not doing lots of fast notes. But the guys who play fast notes, precisely, that stuff is amazing for sure. I've been impressed by that. And a lot of times they'll say it's something easy, and a lot of times it's the same patterns that we're talking about in these kinds of things. It could be on any of these charts. It's like you could hand them one of these charts and say, don't play anything that's not on this chart, and they could just make it sound like they're like everything else, because like anything they want it to, because they can just play all over in that position and in other positions and be able to use all the different tricks all over the neck.
Yeah, and the good guitarists are clearly like memorizing all those options and trying them out until it's so natural that they can just whip right through them.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where it's good for that stuff. And one of the videos we have for tonight actually is Tim Pierce. We've talked to him many times, or talked about him many times here. Tim Pierce and Brett Papa, and they did a video where they're using the caged system that we were talking about here to up your solos. And a lot of it is about connecting the different chord shapes, understanding where the roots, the thirds, the fifths are, being able to get into it, and just the way that Tim kind of breaks it all down, the way that they both kind of break it there, and the way that they jam together as well, where Brett will sit there and just hit a couple of chords real quick, and you can pay attention to his rhythm playing while you're paying attention to what Tim's doing on the lead side, and it's fantastic stuff. We'll get to that in a little bit here.
I was previewing that one last night as I was prepping it.
Yeah. Some good stuff. He always dives right into it. He's just boom, like, get right to it.
Yeah. Tim is he's got a great way of teaching.
Definitely. And we have his link will be there as well for getting you guys over to those pages for Brett Papa and Tim Pierce. We also have one on, I think we're going to do some EQ stuff later on as well. We have an EQ video for that.
And there's one on compression rules.
Yeah, that one.
That one was again, like I was saying last night, it doesn't try to like say like use this compression or that compression, because there's a lot of engineers who'll be like, I only use this particular product for compression. This is more about compression theory and why you use compression and rules you should be considering as you do.
Yeah, exactly.
That'll help you figure out what good compression to use.
And a lot of people, they do get into a bad habit of just I have my preset, I put it on my channel, and I go. And it always sounds that way. And sometimes that's perfect, because that's the sound they always want to get. They want consistency in their sound, so they always have that preset that they go to. But if you're trying to step outside your box a little bit, maybe go away from the preset. Maybe start from scratch and just start dialing in the sound again. And maybe you'll wind up at a different sound that you like even better than the one that you've been using as a preset.
Yeah, it's nice actually. It's nice if you're a musician who has gotten into a box, then I guess you've accomplished something there, because you've found something that you've gotten comfortable with to do your sound. But once you recognize that you're in that box and it's something that you're doing regularly, a musician wants to evolve. So once you get into a box, you want to find a way to also get out of it, so that way it becomes a tool and not something that you become dependent on.
One of my favorite things or suggestions for kind of getting, if you're feeling in a rut or you're feeling like, you just when you practice, you're just playing the same things over and over again. One of the things that I like to do is a suggestion that I don't recall who it was that gave it to me, but it's just play things in a style that you wouldn't normally play. It could be, maybe check out some reggaeton beats, or maybe check out some Latin stuff, or check out, just whatever. Like pick something that you wouldn't normally, be into that style maybe, and try that, because you'll learn little things like, that there's a country lick that you'll hear all the time, and now, now that I'm listening to it, oh yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah, one of the nicest things with the forks that I get from my Phantom library, I hear a lot from artists who are trying a song specifically for that reason. They'll say like, I did this song to get out of my box. That I've never done a country song, so I tried this one.
Oh, nice. Ominous is using diminished arpeggios, runs harmonic minor, Hungarian minor, random chromatic stuff. Yeah. And that's all the spice stuff. That's the stuff that, it's not your standard major minor stuff, and it's the stuff that really makes things stand out. Because like a Hungarian minor, that's totally different. That's going to give you that extra sound where you're like, ooh, that's not normal. That's
He's going to be competing with... He's going to be competing with Jeff Beck soon.
Yeah. He play me some Hungarian, what did I say? Hungarian reggae last time. And so he gave me something, basically he was using a Hungarian minor and playing something with a reggae beat to it. And sure enough, I'm like, yeah, that would totally qualify. If someone was walking by and I said, hey, what style of music are we listening to? They'd probably guess Hungarian reggae, because that's what it was. Mashing two styles.
These guys are going to be huge in Hungary.
Exactly. Demented dissonant stuff, and that's one of those where sometimes it could be playing notes that are right next to each other and having them all ring out at the same time, where if on a piano doesn't really work, because it just sounds like you're just moving your way up. But if you had something where you're doing where it's actually holding the notes, they start clashing against each other more. Maybe even like strings or something, or actually I'm betting horns would probably be good for that. You got a really dissonant sound between them. Let's see, strings.
Violins work great for that.
Yeah, it starts to get really ugly as you start going up more. And you can just keep doing that all day. But you can also do other things that are dissonant as well. You can do a tritone, where you're hitting the root and then, between the fourth and the fifth. Double harmonic minor, there you go. Nice. Now that would have the, let's see. No, I'd have to look that one up.
Ominous, you're so fancy.
Oh, you fancy.
He's been hanging around with you too long.
Yeah. Well, you do hear commonly you've got the natural minor, you've got the harmonic minor, you've got the melodic minor. Now he's talking double harmonic minor. So that's got the sharp 4 in there. Sharp 4. And to me, that's always the F sharp, because we're thinking about the C. Yep. The darkest. Now, a lot of people like the Mixolydian scale, or sorry, the Phrygian scale for metal stuff as well, because that's where you get that flat 2, and that's big as well. So if you're playing in C, you'd be getting that C Phrygian would get you that D flat. And the fact that they're right next to each other makes them really dissonant, even when you spread them apart. It doesn't really help. And if you reverse them, they still sound bad.
Yeah, well, and that kind of approach, that's something Slither Joe does a lot with his songs.
Yep.
That's why exactly. I can always pick up like what he's doing, because whenever he's utilizing that, it's like, okay, as soon as I can find the opening note, I know where he's going.
Nice. Yep, because you know the phrase. That's good. Like I have people who do certain progressions a lot also, so like they can just be noodling around or whatever, and I hear them jump to one spot, and I'm like, okay, I know where he always goes from there. So like you can get ahead of him and be like, okay, there to there, and then we're all locked in on the same page again, which is nice.
Yeah, and that's why it's nice when you get familiar with somebody you're jamming with regularly. Mm-hmm. Once you get comfortable with their approaches, it makes it that much easier to write songs with them.
Yeah, definitely. And we've definitely done where we practice a good bit. Playing with most recently, we also went out to an open jam on was it Tuesday? I think I said, and had a little open jam over there. So that was fun. It was just it's a bit of a drive. It's like an hour away from here for me, so I had to drive a bit to get up there. But they have an open jam every Tuesday. Just
Glenn even got recruited by like 3 other bands. They're
I
like,
did.
"Oh, you play bass? Can
Yep.
you play for us?"
As soon as I got there, I was talking to the guy running the jam, and there's only 3 people, 4 people in the whole place, so it was really slow night right at the beginning. And then by the time everybody's playing, there's 20, 30 people in there, and again, it's a pretty small place, so beyond 30 people, you'd be like packed in shoulder to shoulder. But yeah, the guy who was running it asked if I wanted to sit in with him and another guy where he just wanted some bass to go along with what he was doing, so I said sure. And he was able to walk me through. He was really good on piano, actually. So he was playing the keys, and then he was just calling on the fly. He'd be like, "Okay, we're gonna go to the 4." I'm like, "Yeah, no problem. Okay, to the 4. Yeah, let's go." And then, okay, back to the 5. Oh yeah, no problem. I expected that.
See, and that's what I'm always saying about like why you are such a useful musician to have around, because you not only can pick up by ear really fast, but if the person's like, "I'm going to do a 1-4-5," you don't even have to hear it.
Yep.
You just know like what you're dealing with.
What I really like is when they say like, "Okay, it's gonna be a 145 in the key of D or whatever," and the bass line is kind of like this. Like they give me a little sample. If you can give me a little taste of the bass groove, we're locked in. We're ready to go. Like I can
Yeah,
just
and
because otherwise I'm just gonna make something up that may or may not fit with what you're doing. Because I might not know what your intention is for this 145 we're about to jump into. But if you give me an idea of what the bass groove feels like, then our parts are going to already match because I'm playing the bass groove you're expecting, so your parts are already going to lock in.
yeah, when you're looking for like that studio musician, or say, a versatile a band musician that can bounce around between different bands for hire, those are the traits and qualities that like, and if they can do it with bass, if they can do it with drums or with rhythm guitar,
Yep.
those kinds of instruments, you can be a musician who's always ready for hire.
Yep, exactly. And that's the thing is a lot of the bands that I work with, where I'm just doing lights or sound, a lot of them, they have some guys in the band where like the one guy has his guitar stand there has a guitar on it and a mandolin and a ukulele, and he's got a harmonica in his pocket, and it's like, okay, so the guy can literally do all of that. If you need any of those things done, like he can do the leads on any of those while singing. Is the other thing.
Is that
Hey,
a
what's happening?
harmonica in your? Is that a harmonica in your pocket? Or are you just happy to see me?
It's a contrabass.
It's a harmonica.
Exactly. And then the other guy, one of the guys who was playing fiddle, actually, because it was more of a country style band, and they had a guy playing fiddle. So they also did "Devil Goes Down to Georgia" and did a couple of songs along that style. But the guy who was playing fiddle also played guitar, and he had saxophone too, which was one that I wasn't expecting. Like a lot of times you'll see people, bass or stringed instruments, not as much of a leap, but to go from one of those to like saxophone and do it well, it's like, damn, like that's the way to do it.
And sadly, you don't hear sax as much like these days. In the old days, the early days of rock, sax was a big instrument, like used all over the place. In some bands was a necessity and would get utilized in every song.
Yep.
Now it's become one of those niche instruments that they throw in for a flavor for a part. And I
And again,
love
it does
the
depend on the
sax.
band. Does depend on the band. Like again, I work with some bands that actually have a full horn section, so they've got a saxophone, a trombone, and a trumpet at every gig, and then occasionally they'll even have additional guest saxophonists or whatever, or trumpet, jump on and do a solo here or jump in for that song there. So it's cool that they kind of mix it up and bring people around like that.
Oh, and sax is much more useful if you have like a 4-part brass, and you can get that trombone and maybe even a tenor sax going with the alto, and they become part of the rhythm section.
Yeah, and that's the best when everything starts to just kind of meld together and all works together. There you go, ska
Yeah.
bands, yeah, big band aspect.
Add a trumpet in there, and you're good to go.
Yep. I still never found my trumpets. I was looking a minute ago. I found the strings and I was like, wait a minute. Am I high or low? Go low. Nope. Wrong way.
If I have to guess, I'm always high.
Well, if I have to guess, I'd say you're always high. And there's nothing wrong with that. Oh, wait. The muted trumpet. It's a little bit too electronic. A little bit too compared to the actual trumpet.
Now the muted trumpet is when they put that like ball in the front of it.
It could also just be a hand. You can also just use your hand to
so
restrict.
they can just palm it.
Yep. The trick is that most people's palms can't cover the whole thing like mine. I mean, I can cover a tuba.
I was going to say you could cover 2
It's not a
trumpets.
tuba. But yeah, for muting it, there is a mute which usually sits in there and it allows some air to get around the sides. There's like picture it like it almost looked like the
So it's
capsule
like
that the astronauts come back in.
it's like doing the Indian like wah 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 kind of.
Similar, but you're trying to restrict the airflow coming out, and also technically you're also blocking the direct path of the sound wave, so they have to bounce off your hand to get somewhere. But if you don't want to close it entirely because then you're not able to push any air through it,
Yeah.
or not much air through it because only what's escaping through the valves is what's getting out. But when you're actually playing and just kind of blocking most of it, you can get that wah wah kind of a sound, which is similar to using the mouth box, for playing guitar. You can get that wah kind of a sound, but you can do the same with when you're doing harmonica. You'll see people do it this way, where their hands
Yeah.
are basically cupped around it, and they're doing the wah wah wah, and like opening the hand to let the sound out, and also muting it just by trying to keep it encapsulated in there.
Yeah, and it can give them a wah wah effect.
Yep, absolutely. And that's the thing is, one of the things that you'll get with harmonica also is bends, which I hadn't really considered because there's no controls on a harmonica that I'm using, the ones that I use, where it's just standard. Like this one's an E harmonica, so you're playing in the key of E major, let's say. And when you're playing the harmonica, there's no method to bend that I saw, but it has to do with the amount of air you're pushing through. You can actually bend, especially the second and third notes from the bottom that are on the harmonica. You can bend that second note by over blowing or by over pulling. And like by over pulling, you're basically you're making a sound as if you're making the sound of chaw, like you're opening your jaw. Chaw is the sound. So if you have a harmonica in your mouth and you're pulling air in, and you go chaw, it like pulls the air in a lot faster and makes
Now
it so
you're
that instead
you're
of
not
being,
you're not controlling the pitch on a harmonica from your. It's not like a voice. You don't control pitch on the harmonica that way. You
no.
still do it on the
There's-
instrument, right?
It's like 10 individual reeds essentially, or 10 individual notes. When you have an E harmonica, when you're blowing through the notes, there's 10 holes on a harmonica, a standard one like that, and the notes would be basically root, third, fifth, root, third, fifth, root, third, fifth, root. So if you're playing a C harmonica, and that's why it sounds so good if you just blow through a harmonica and just go straight up, like brrr, that's what you're ripping right through. You're just going 1 3 5 1 3 5 1 3 5 1. And if you were to pull, and you pull air back through it, it's different. Where you're doing 2 5 7, and then
oh, that's what it does on the pullback.
yeah, when you blow, it's that C, and then when you pull air in, it's that D. You blow is an
So
E.
it pulls back like a step up.
It's basically 2 different notes, and they're different depending on which one you're going to. So like I'm trying to remember now exactly what it is, but they're definitely, when you blow, it's definitely 1 3 5 1 3 5 1 3 5 1. When you pull, I think it's 2 5 7, because that makes the 5 chord, an inversion of the 5 chord. So basically, let's start from the bottom and go like you blow and then you pull, right? So you go blow and then pull would be the D, blow is the E, but then when you pull, you're up to a G already. And then it's also a G when you blow, so it's like those 2 notes are the same, and then it goes up to a B, and then a C. So basically, when you're blowing, you're getting the 1 3 5, and if you're pulling, you're getting the 2 5 7, so you're getting the 5 chord. When you want the 4 chord, you're jumping up to that next octave where you've got the 2 4 6 happening, and that's getting you that. The 4 chord. So you're getting the 4 6 1 in there by hitting that section of the harmonica, and then the last part of the harmonica is more just regular. But the last 2 you're doing, instead of blow, pull, at the very end you go blow, pull, blow to get the notes to work out right. It's all a bit of confusing, but the main idea
Oh
is that
man, that blows.
that blows, exactly.
And
And sometimes-
if you want to be able to go in different keys, then you got to bring a suitcase of harmonicas to be flexible.
Well, technically not a whole suitcase, because what they gave as a starter set was 7 harmonicas. And what they do is they take the circle of fifths and they start from the B flat and go around the whole sharp side. So they go B flat, F,
No,
C,
that should
G,
that
D,
should
A,
cover
E, B.
a good chunk. Of
It covers
what you
most
would need.
because that's a lot of what people would have as a starter set. But anybody who's serious about harmonica would probably have all 12. Plus, there's
like
also
Angie's buddy who's got like a suitcase of them. Yeah.
Some have a bandolier where it's just okay, like, pull this one out and use that, and then put it right back. Have them right on the chest there. Relying heavily on the circle of fifths is important. Yeah.
See, and that's another instrument that, like, again, in the old days, utilized a lot, and as rock has evolved, has kind of and country too. Like, you used to harmonica was like a staple of early country, and
hmm
now you'll hear it in an intro during a solo moment, and
For me, it's a lot of times the blues is where I was catching most of it.
oh
And
yeah,
that was some place where I started kind of my musical journey when I kind of got back into it 10 years ago. I was listening to a lot of blues, and I was getting Charlie Musselwhite and just all kinds of really good blues stuff happening on harmonica, and that's what kind of got me into looking at it a little bit more. One thing, he was mentioning the circle of fifths and the circle of fourths. This is one of the other graphic. This is one that's just technically the cycle of fifths and cycle of fourths, same thing. It just depends which way you're going. So if you start at the top and you go to the right, C, G, D, A, E, that's a circle of fifths. If you start at the top and you go left, C, F, B flat, E flat, A flat, that's the circle of fourths. So it's fifths this way, fourths that way. And the one that you're looking at in the top center, that's your root key. So if you're in the root key of C, then your 5 is just next to you on the one side, and your 4 is just next to you on the other side. And the three
man,
relative minor keys are the 2, 3, 6.
you are locked and loaded on those charts.
Yep.
Go, Glenn.
Yeah. I had a couple of them open today because I was like, this would make sense if I could just go, okay, that one, and say, what about this one? Yeah, let's look at this one, because this one's got the A minor pentatonic that you can relate right to the Aeolian up there. This one also had I was doing it with the colors at the bottom for the different modes. Yep, another one that shows all the notes on the fretboard. I had one, I don't have that one loaded right now, but it's basically like this top one, or the top part of this one, where it's A Aeolian, for example. This is the whole, up to the 22nd fret at least.
When I start learning bass and guitar, I'm gonna wallpaper my walls with these.
Yeah. There's so many really good charts, and even, which one was it? I want to say it was Jake Lizzo, who had a couple of charts that he had for sale that were basically all of the modes, but with each one it had like a whole breakdown of what you would do with this mode, what where it fits best with, the things that complement it, when you would use it, what styles of music, all that kind of stuff. Very cool stuff.
Yeah, and they cram a lot of information into that one little screen.
Oh yeah, and that's the other thing that blew me away. Also, was again even just the circle of fifths. You do get a lot of information in there. You're not only seeing where the sharps are, what order the sharps go in, what things relative major, minor. Looking at that wedge, whatever your root key that you're playing major in the center of that, whatever wedge you're in there, there's your 1, 4, 5, 2, 3, and 6 are all right there for you.
Well, and really this started really making more sense when you explained how, like, as you're going through the sharps, you're going through the fifths,
Mm-hmm.
and then as you go through the flats, you're going through the fourths.
Mm-hmm.
That clicked in. It made this a lot clearer to me.
Yeah, and the one that made it easy for me to kind of cheat and learn this back in, I think it was in, was it 7th grade? No, probably
Especially
sophomore
when
year, I
you
think it
get
was.
down there to the bottom, that A sharp minor, B flat minor, D sharp minor, E flat minor.
Yeah, stuff gets ugly.
That's a crazy area to be playing in.
Yep. Because when you look at the straight bottom there, it does show that you got either 6 flats or 6 sharps. And if you look at the one to the left of that, it's saying, oh, that's either 5 flats or 7 sharps. And then when you're like, wait, 7 sharps? There's only 5 black notes. How do you have 7 sharps? And it's like, yep, you're sharping the E to F and you're sharping the B to C. And it gets kind of crazy. Yeah, and it is a huge, music theory is a huge category. There is a lot of stuff in there. And you can study for years and feel like you've barely scratched the surface, but at the same time, sometimes even just getting that one little nugget, something will just click for when, whether it's this chart or that chart, or the 15th time you look at something that you were like, this doesn't make any sense, but the 15th time you look at it, it's like, wait a minute, oh, this and that, and they kind of locks in your brain, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, now it makes total sense.
It's true. Those epiphany moments. I mean, a lot of my theory I learned in the late 80s, early 90s, back when I was in school. A lot of it didn't click in until the last couple of years since we started doing this, and some of the little observations that you picked up on and seeing things in color-coded charts. They didn't show me this that way in the 90s. I saw black and white, and everything looked the same.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. For me, it was a jazz improvisation class in high school when I was playing keyboard. And I could not improvise for anything. And jazz was way too complicated for me at that stage. I was playing more classical stuff mostly. And just trying to play, like if somebody said, just play me something in A, I would be like, there it is. Hey, ta-da! Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Because I mean, I don't know, like not knowing what notes there are to play. Because from classical, it was always play this song this way from the paper. Here you go. You can listen to an example. This is what it sounds like. This is what it looks like on paper. Now reproduce it, and you're trying to make it like that. Now you're supposed to put your own nuance on it. Of course, you're supposed to own the song and make it your own. But there are still things that, you play it this way, you don't play it that way. There are things that are rules that you go by. But when it came to improvisation, it's like, well, if it's not on a paper, how do you know what to play? And that's where, for me, the biggest thing to tell anybody is pentatonic. I mean, somebody could know nothing about guitar or keyboard or anything, and you could say, sit down at the piano and play nothing but black notes, and only focus on stopping on the F sharp or G flat, or the E flat or D sharp, because that would make it feel like you're playing in a major pentatonic or a minor pentatonic.
Well, and with an exercise like that, it helps you to focus more on the up-down approach. Like, you know the notes that you're hitting. At that point, do you want to go up or do you want to go down? Or do you want to stay on the same note for a little bit?
Yeah, or go around that note, because you can always do, you kind of like dance your way around wherever you're trying to get to, and just kind of, you'll get there eventually, but the idea is to do something interesting on your way there. And sometimes it's melodic or rhythmically interesting, sometimes it's melodically interesting, sometimes it's both, but it should be interesting in some way. Otherwise people are like, why am I listening to this?
And that's why soloing, it's good to know soloing. Like, that's why I want to strengthen my soloing, so you can get the melody writing and go through the motion of getting from here to there, rather than like with rhythm, it's just kind of like, okay, I'm going to hit this note, I'm going to hit this note, I'm going to hit this note.
Yep. And I think Knight's in for a treat, because it's a chart that shows all the chords, and that's kind of what that video from Tim Pierce and Brett Papa is getting into. Basically taking the caged system chords and basically showing us how to utilize those in soloing to get ourselves more interesting solos and be able to feel comfortable wherever we are on the deck playing those types of things.
Oh, and Tim's incredible at the soloing. Tim is the tops.
Oh yeah. It's a treat for sure. I don't recall exactly how long the video is, but it should take us across 10 o'clock here.
Yeah, it should roll us.
Want to check that out?
Roll us through the first hour.
All right, let's do that. So this is Here's Why the Cage System Will Up Your Solos. Tim Pierce and Brett Papa.
Hey, this is Tim Pierce. Brett Papa brought over that piece of music. He's been spending a lot of time in Nashville, and I think I can hear the influence there. Anyway, we both agree that chord shapes basically allow us to solo more melodically. We're always envisioning chord shapes wherever we are on the neck. He has a new product called Caged Unleashed, which is a 9.5-hour tutorial where he talks about this and teaches this. I've been looking at it this way for a long time, and he has too, and a lot of great players do too. I mean, Guthrie Trapp said it the other day in a video just off the cuff, that's how he visualizes things when he solos too. So if you can see the chord shapes everywhere on the neck, you're going to use them kind of as arpeggios, but you're also going to use them as target notes whenever you land, and it just makes you play more melodically. And you always have the chords in mind when you're soloing. So click the link below if you want to check out Brett Papa's Caged Unleashed. Like I said, it's a 9.5-hour downloadable tutorial on this very subject. So let me give you a little demonstration of how my mind works. The solo I just did was a lot of notes and a lot of riffs, right? But the way my mind works, I'm seeing chords. I'll give you a demonstration. was playing was F sharp minor, D, and E triads all over the neck. So once you learn those, it gives you just a much bigger kaleidoscope of places you can land and melodic, fragments that you can pull from. I know you do a lot of work with the cage system. And,
right.
Yeah, and to me, it's very similar to just using chord shapes up and down the neck. They kind of mesh together. Same thing, right? So when I try and play melodically, which I try and do, I know you do too.
Right.
It's one of our favorite things.
Well,
we like the same records.
We do, totally.
And these guys we like a lot of your Nashville buddies, they're experts at playing melodically.
Right.
And so if I'm seeing an F sharp minor chord,
okay,
and I want to play melodically, I might take a little piece of it up here on the neck.
Right.
And that creates the beginning of a melody.
Okay.
Or I might do it up here.
Right.
And then I play a blues lick afterwards.
Okay, yeah.
So that's how I kind of put melody into the blues.
Sure.
And,
Right. Well, and I was always kind of wondering that too, because when I people started to tell me about you when I was working at Divided by 13, that's one of the cool things I noticed about your playing. It was very melodic,
right?
But it has blues elements to it. But I liked it that it wasn't typical in the, everyone's just trying to throw a Stevie Ray Vaughan lick in there. You have your own way of doing blues, which is really melodic, and it was hard to find that. I mean, it was more prevalent, I'm sure back in like the 90s or 80s or whatever, which is where I'm the child of, right? I love that. But I was always curious on how you started to do that and incorporate that sound, and you go outside of just the typical root third fifth.
Well, I'll show you. If you wouldn't mind play some of these chords. We'll do it just kind of rubato.
Yeah.
Play the F sharp minor, and I'll show you how I would approach that. So I start with a chord shape. See the chord shape here, maybe? Here. Up here.
Okay.
And that reminded me of Mark Knopfler there, too.
For sure.
So I might choose 3 notes from the chord shape.
Okay.
I might even just choose 2. Let me show you that.
Right.
Okay, now go to the D chord. And the D's right here.
Yeah. Okay, now, let me
ahead.
ask you this really quick. So that sounds like you're almost just following the chord at that point, because it starts to take that D major sound really quickly. So is that something that you do?
Yes, there's 2 ways you can do it. You can either ignore the chords and
Right.
play simply an F sharp minor as it travels through the progression, but you have to honor the A that is about to happen.
Yeah.
But you can also really speak the chord language and kind of state the chords. So it's good to do both.
Sure.
And change it up. But let me do this. Play the 3 chords, which would be F sharp minor, D, and A.
Okay.
And I'll speak chordally.
Okay.
Here we go.
E?
Yeah, sure.
See, I like that though, because it's like it's you always hear about target notes or whatever, and it's like you're hitting the notes of the chord. How can you go wrong, right?
Well, and that was me exaggerating. I would never probably do it that literally.
Sure.
I would disguise it and do a little of it and then pull away from it. So let's try it again, and I'll do more naturally what I would do. Here we go. Go ahead.
Oh, see, I love that. See, I love those licks. Okay, so start and explain some of those licks, because those are some of my favorite licks that you do. Those kind of, what are you bending the ninth, or I don't even know what it is.
Well, what I did there was you were on the F sharp minor, and I looked at the chord shape up here, basically fret 9 and fret 11, this one up here.
Yeah.
And so I spoke that, and then you went to the D, and I saw the D there. And then I kind of let go and just played in a scale fashion.
Right.
Okay? But when you went to F sharp minor the next time, I thought to myself, I've already been too melodic.
Sure.
I've already used too many chord shapes to define things.
Right.
I'm just going to play F sharp minor blues over the F sharp minor and the D. So that's all that is. That's just pentatonic blues in F sharp minor.
Yep.
And I'm ignoring the D. Now, when you go to the E, I did go back to kind of chordal playing.
So is that just the E major arpeggio you're playing, basically?
Yeah, so I'm up here. I see the E up here.
Okay.
Just kind of doing the 3-octave version of that.
Right.
Jumping around the neck. Let me take another shot at it.
Okay. 2, 3, 4.
There, I'm trying to just use the chords in my mind to just jump on them occasionally, but play blues mostly. And I even did the minor major pentatonic thing.
Yeah.
So trying to get it more into kind of a bluesy kind of country kind of thing.
Is that easy for you to do because that sits on the A so long, like where you can get in and out of there?
Yeah.
So give them an example of that thing in particular. So if I hung out on that A.
Yeah, so this time I used the chords just as kind of shapes in my mind to keep me landing in the right places, but mostly I was playing the blues. So you're on the F sharp.
Okay.
On the D. Ignoring the D and staying in F sharp. Because they share the same notes.
Yeah.
Okay, now you go to A.
Right.
I'm taking a liberty there and just kind of making it A7, A mixolydian.
Yeah. So it's almost like you're playing a minor pentatonic throwing in the major third.
Yeah.
I guess.
And so that is, you're stretching the rules, but that's what you want to do sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
It sounds rougher and tougher and more bluesy if I just do that. But I'm seeing, like I said in my mind, I'm seeing the A chord here.
Yeah.
I'm seeing the F sharp, just in case I want to land on the right note.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
And in case I want to revert back to more melodic playing. So now do the second half of the chords, which is the F sharp minor to D to E, and I'll demonstrate that.
All right. Yeah.
So I was still seeing the chord shapes, but I definitely, when you went to E, it was just E pentatonic.
Are you thinking E? Yeah, E major pentatonic there. Okay, cool. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So how do you get back out of that? That sound. So you're kind of walking those lines because if you just stuck straight to E major pentatonic, there might be notes in there that don't necessarily work over A, right? So
well, I don't know. I mean, the thing is, because it sits on the A so long, it sits on the A for 2 cycles basically, and the E for 2 cycles. You really have to switch keys, I think. You really do have to play in A when it's over A.
Right.
That's really the answer to that. And then in E when it's over E.
Okay.
Because the chords are sitting there for a double cycle.
Yeah.
So you have 1 bar of F sharp minor, 1 bar of D, and when it lands on the A, it stays there for 2 bars if you're counting slowly.
So can we do the whole thing and let them hear? Okay.
Yeah.
2, 3, 4.
I was really playing chordally that time and showing you that when it lands on the A, you have to be in A. And when it lands on the E, you have to be in E. That's how my mind works for those.
No, that's very interesting.
Because you're staying there.
Yeah. So as a player, how did you start to... There's 2 things I want to ask. Okay, so as a player, where did you start to develop being able to play like that? Just stepping outside of just rock and adding in a lot more melody? First question. And then second question, you're so freaking fluid when you play your blues licks. How do you keep that connectivity to the strings? There's no gaps. It's like this really fluid sound.
Well, you and I have talked about that before. It's basically, I'm connecting all the notes and rolling my fingers over on the strings.
Okay.
And each note lasts until the next note. And partially the chord playing helps with that, because if I take an A chord shape here and I plant my hand in this A shape, I can connect everything really easily. It's not like I'm going... Yeah, that's an exaggeration meant to show you not how to do it. But if the A chord is here, everything's connected. So literally, the index finger is always barring over two notes or rolling between two notes. That's a really good question.
Yeah, because
and the chord shapes help connect everything. So you kind of brought it full circle by asking that question.
Yeah, it's interesting because just in editing so much footage of you, some of the licks that I was like, God, what is that lick? And then when you break it down slowly, it's you know, I don't want to downplay it by saying it's simple, but it's a simple,
it is simple.
Pentatonic lick, but it's the fluidity of it makes it sound like it just how it sits.
Okay, if it's one string playing, then it's a lot of hammer-ons and pull-offs.
Right. Okay. Right, because you can always keep it connected. Okay.
Now, if I picked all that, it wouldn't sound as legato. So I'm a big fan of a lot of left-hand speed.
Okay. Right.
And then the other thing is that connection when you're seeing the chord shapes, your hands are planted in those chord shapes, and it creates that connection.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Chords. The notes can actually bleed together because you're using the chord shape with your left hand.
Oh, that's amazing. It's tough though because like I remember one of the first times I came up here and your power was out or something like that, and you're like, okay, let's do a quick lesson, and that's one of the first things you said. You're like, you got to make sure you're not cutting off the note, and I was like, what is that even like? How do you do that?
Well, every note you play, try and make it last all the way to the next note. That's the other trick. Whatever it takes, no gaps between the two notes.
Right. So if you're ascending, though, like what does that do? Can you give an example? I mean, so you couldn't possibly, you're at the very last microsecond of...
Yeah, and there's always going to be gaps when you make moves, but... In a situation like this where you're shifting from one string to the other, it's kind of easy because if your third finger is on string 4, and your next move is your index finger on string 3, it naturally creates a situation where you don't have to leave a gap.
Right. See that? Yeah.
You go do the same thing here.
Right.
So if one's finger is on one string and the other finger's on the other string, then that's the trick you can use to keep connected.
Yeah, exactly. See, that's what I'm saying, because that lick sounds so fluid, you know, and that's such a, I think, you know, I've been playing for years, and before you said that, I never really, it's like, oh, it's right. And then when I listen back to it, it's like, oh, okay, I can hear it. Now I can hear it. It sounds like a, truck horn, but like, that's one of those things that I think as players that just are hobbyists and always wondering, why do those guys sound so good and so fluid? And it's that I've noticed just watching you for years, like, he's always got contact, unless you don't want it to, obviously, but always got that connection to the...
Well, it's easy if you're skipping strings and your index finger is on one string and your third finger's on the next string.
Right.
Then one can stay planted while the other one arrives at the next string. So that's one good trick.
Yeah.
Let's play through the chords one last time and just see what happens. Thanks, man.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you.
Always a pleasure listening to those guys, for sure. I mean, the stuff that they go over, and like he said, the fluidity with which he does it is just crazy. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah. Paul actually asked the question I wanted to ask Tim when you started playing his videos, how he does it so fluidly. That was a great question.
Exactly. And it did kind of build on, it was something that he wouldn't have even necessarily thought to talk about, because it is something that's so baked into his playing, that's been baked into his playing for so long, that he might not even think about the fact that he's doing it until somebody points it out. Why does it sound so fluid? And then it's like, well, yeah, that's a good point. Now, Knight was also talking about arpeggios a second ago, so I just wanted to bring up something like this, one of my other charts. It's a bit of a whoa, but it's basically you're looking at the major seventh. This is basically 5 different types of arpeggios rooted on the 6th string in the 3 positions. So, for example, the top line would be C major 7th in first position, second position, and third position, and then it repeats again. So if you learn those three, then you know all of the six string roots. We're starting on the fattest string. You can use these arpeggios for major sevenths. The second column there is minor sevenths. So that's 3 different modes or positions for the minor sevenths. Yeah, I can. I don't think I have a link because I think I made this one myself by going from a website and just kind of copy and pasting each of them like next to each other to make it all one big thing that I can look at. But one thing is, it's in the video here. I'm going to scroll through it as we talk about it, but I can also figure out a way to get it available for you as well. But yeah, I'm in a bad habit of using Paint to just do cut and paste.
These will be available on Angie's YouTube tomorrow.
Yeah.
YouTube.com/Angified. You can always review.
Yep.
And I put the link up for that video from Tim. Definitely, if you guys aren't subscribed to him, go visit him on YouTube.
Absolutely. Tim Pierce, I mean, just a great resource there. So many different things that you can learn, and he's got such great playing and such a great attitude as he's playing. And he always looks like he's just having so much fun as well.
Oh, and I love seeing these ones where he has a guest on with him. He interacts with other musicians so wonderful.
Yeah. And in that way, it does remind me of my cousin Jeff Beck, in terms of just, you throw him into any musical situation and he's just going to shine. Same thing with Tim. Like, you could throw him in anywhere. He's been a studio musician for so long. If you looked at his list of credits of things that he's done, I mean, he seems like a very humble guy too. He's not sitting there, I'm the best, blah blah blah. It's just, he's like, I just do it like this. It just shows you how it is.
Yeah, but he's
very cool guy.
He's the kind of guy that every studio wants to bring in.
Yeah, absolutely. Having him on staff for sure. Just as a quick note, just on these on the chart here, the first at the top here, get back there. Top of the chart is major seventh, top column. Next one is minor seventh. Then there's G seventh, which is just seventh chords. So that's using the major third and the minor or flat 7. Then you've got the minor 7 flat 5, and then you've got the diminished 7th.
And
so once
all
you've got
of
those,
all of these charts are basically showing you options.
Yep. Exactly.
Which if you memorize all those options, then your fluidity is there. Like, once you know every option and it's burned in your brain, you are fluid.
One thing I would mention also is that as far as practicing goes, knowing, for example, in jazz, you'll see a lot of 2-5-1 progressions where you're doing a minor 2, a dominant 5, and a 1, 2-5-1. And if you're doing that, you could literally use this whole top section of this as a total practice session where, when you're on the 2 chord, you're using the one in the middle. So you're using that middle column, and you got those 3 positions. So try taking solos, from that first position on the bottom there. And then when it goes to the 5 chord, use the dominant 7th on the 3rd column or the 3rd row there. And then you're doing that, and then you go back up to, when you get to the 1 chord, you're just doing the major. And then the next time go to the 2nd position and do the same thing. And you're just kind of, what I do is I kind of let my eyes rest on the chart. I'm not like aggressively reading the chart while I'm playing. I just kind of, my eyes are looking at the chart while I'm playing. And I'm like, I could do this, I could do that. I see different spots where I could go, just kind of wandering. And yeah, I can send that to you. No problem, Nate. I just have to rename the file.
Now, would you say, like in the case of like jazz especially, knowing your options is the first half of the battle, and improving your improvisation is the second half of it? Like, now that you know your options, getting good at improving. Like, a lot of times the jazz players, when they're playing together, there's no set structure going on. It's a lot of improv.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And it's all listening to each other. Being aware, like, sometimes the whole band just kind of brings it down. Everything gets a little bit slower, a little bit quieter and everything. And you just see how everybody just kind of, they hear it at the same time, and everyone kind of brings it down together and changes the whole groove. And then they build it back up to go into a solo or something. Just that kind of dynamic change is something that's always a treat to be a part of when that happens with a band as well.
It's the Wooly Bully effect. A little bit louder now, a little bit louder now.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, as a second treat here, the other chart is the 5th string root arpeggios. So once you get those on that fattest string, that's when you're using the root out on the fattest E string at the bottom. This would be if you're using the root on the 5th string, the second fattest string.
So the yellows represent the variation?
Actually, that one I didn't even notice that they had the yellows on there. Could be that we're looking at just the next position. Let's see, 5, 7, 1.
Yeah. I see the pattern. Like 3 to 7 is 15 to 19.
Yep. And that's where they're just kind of showing you, in this part of the neck you're playing in this position, in this part you're playing this way, and in this part you're playing this way. Sometimes they also show you're going to jump from this section to that section. So rather than trying to do it as a fluid, playing, part of it down here and then shifting positions, like going through this whole position and then jumping to that other position. But usually you want to do everything smoothly. So whether you're sliding into it or going up from there. But in this case, it does show, you'll see notes on all 6 strings, even though we're talking about rooting, using the root note on the 5th string. So I think that's why they're showing that. That's what it is. They're showing the root position. So on this first one, top left, that yellow box, you see how the yellow box has the 1 on the 2nd string from the bottom, right? And that's telling you that you're rooting on the 5th string, the second fattest string. So that's where the root is, but you're starting this whole arpeggio on the 6th string back there. So it's kind of, you're trying to think about both at the same time. You're trying to think about, this is where my 5th string root is, and this is where the arpeggio lives when I'm rooting on the 5th string, but I want to be able to play all the way down to the fat notes on the 6th string as well. So you're getting comfortable with how those positions look when you're shifted by that amount. It's a little hard to describe, but it's more when you're actually playing through.
And this is actually structured for right-handed guitar, huh?
You got the 0 fret out there, yep, and then the 24th fret is in here.
That's always what's been throwing me off. Wow. Okay. Remember how I was saying, like, I'm naturally, I feel like I'm a left-handed guitar. I've never played a guitar left-handed because I never had one. But when I was looking at these tabs and you were saying how, like, it, top to bottom, I was always thinking left-handed for some reason, and everything was reversed. Now it makes sense.
Now, it also depends on which charts you're looking at, because it is kind of confusing. And like for this chart, for example, I have them both ways, which is kind of a bad idea. But like the 2 necks that you see in the top right section, you've got the pentatonic neck and you've got the diatonic neck, essentially showing you A minor and showing you A minor pentatonic. In those two, showing you the full neck of all of those. And that's why I think that if you see that resource, it looks the same as that other chart did. So I think that came from something called J Guitar, which was just like an online scale and chord visualizer. So I was able to just say, okay, show me what A minor pentatonic looks like, from the 5th fret to the 7th fret, and it highlights that part for me. And then I just took a screenshot of that, and then I copied over the next one. Said, okay, show me from the 8th fret to the 10th fret or whatever, and just put each of them next to each other, locked them together to make the full neck, and then kind of laid them out. And thank you, I appreciate that.
I bet you'll be able to ask ChatGPT this.
Oh yeah, it would know, sure. And then the other thing is, again, those top 2 are showing the neck horizontally, but then the whole left section and the whole bottom section are showing the neck where the headstock is up and the body of the guitar is down. So everything is shifted at that point. So when you're looking at those bottom ones, the fattest string is on the far left, and the skinniest string is on the far right, instead of the fattest string being on the bottom and the skinniest on top.
Seeing it that way, I'm more like, going back to the 80s and old school tab that I'd look at. The left to right, I could visualize better, but the vertical like this is something that I just wasn't getting used to visually till I just realized I'm looking at it in reverse.
Yep, and this one actually, this is, excuse me, back to the high country guitar. Let me go to G Ionian, because that's major again. So if we were looking at G major, this is a chart again where we're showing mapping the caged shapes to the pentatonic shapes to the Ionian shapes, and this is again with the headstock up at the top and the body down at the bottom. So the fat string is on the left and the skinny string is on the right. So this would be for righty guitar, and just when you're visualizing it, you're imagining playing, your fretting hand is essentially holding the neck up and the body is down, but you wouldn't play in that position, but that's what you're visualizing when you're looking at these. But we do see again, the caged shapes. You're seeing that this is the E shape here at the 3rd fret for a G, and then you're going to the D shape. And with the cage, the other thing is they're in that order. So like we're starting on the E, then we go E to the D to the C, A, and G. Or if we started here, it would be from the C to the A to the G to the E to the D. So they're always in that order, and it's good to start visualizing that. Even if you're only visualizing, for example, the movable E shape and the movable A shape are the 2 most common. So you'll see that 1st column and the 4th column. Those are 2 bar chords that you'll see people use all the time. So like 3rd fret bar chord for the G and the 10th fret bar chord for the G on the 5th. And then using those 2, you can just lock into those two separate areas of the neck. Whenever you're playing that G, you can lock in at the 3rd fret, you can lock in at the 10th fret, but this is trying to open you up to be available to play at the 7th fret in that C shape, or at the 5th fret in the D shape, or at the 12th fret in the G shape.
Give you more options.
More options, yep.
Yep.
Yeah, and the same thing. Pentatonic minor was the very first thing that I learned, and probably about that same time, because I didn't really play guitar much at all when I was young. I also started with piano. Took many years of piano lessons when I was a kid, but it never really took in terms of being able to improvise until just these last couple of years, just kind of messing around with what we're doing here.
It has definitely taken now, the piano I've heard you playing.
Yeah, and a lot of that just came from being more familiar with bass and guitar. The more I learn about any of the instruments, the more it helps me on the others, which is kind of weird. Like some people, they're like, oh, you do 3 instruments, you should really focus on one so you can get really good at the one. To me, it's more that by getting familiar with all 3, I'm getting familiar with the role each one plays in a band, and I can more effectively play my part as any of them now.
And even if you master one instrument, I mean, I feel like I've gotten comfortable enough with the keyboards that learning these other instruments will only like learning bass from the bass perspective is helping me to play better bass on my keyboard.
Yep.
Now I just got to get my hands on a bass so I can really practice.
Yeah, and again, if you have an acoustic guitar, that would be a good start, just because, number one, it'll help you roughen the fingers up a little bit. If it's an acoustic, if it's an electric, it would probably still help if you're not normally a stringed instrument player. Just playing anything, even if it's just playing chromatically, like play the 1st fret, 2nd fret, 3rd fret, 4th fret, and just go back and forth, that'll get your hands stronger. It'll get the fingertips a little tougher so that you don't end up, playing 5 minutes and then all of a sudden your fingers are about to bleed because, if you're pressing too hard. That's the other thing, is when people are just starting out, a lot of times they really dig in. They're trying to crunch the neck, push the strings into the neck, where you just want to fret only as hard as you have to get the sound to come out. That's another key for learning to play quickly and without damaging yourself or without injuring or even tiring yourself out when you're trying to play more. All good stuff that you can do. Just having any stringed instrument around, you can start getting yourself prepared, gearing up towards when you do get a bass, and then it's going to be all different because, again, the bass, those strings are a lot tougher on your fingers than the guitar strings are, but they don't cut in as much necessarily, where the guitar is more very, very thin strings, where the bass is fatter strings, so it's more cheese grater style of toughening the fingers up.
Callus those fingers up.
The round wounds. Like
well, and what I like studying, guitar and bass stringed instruments versus the keyboard, it also makes me think about the attack, like the plucking or the finger picking, that approach, translating that over to the keyboard side or vice versa.
Mm-hmm. The cheese grating is like a lot of sliding stuff.
That's the primary difference between playing the same chords on a guitar or on a keyboard, is the approach.
And again, it all depends on which instrument, and the setup is important too. Like if your action is too high, then you're working harder. Every time you're pushing a string, you have to push it that much further to get it to actually fret. So having your instrument set up well, where you can play comfortably and smoothly, is important as well.
Why would you bring your action up or down? Is it to get more
down
sensitivity, or
you can play faster when it's low because you only have to push the string from where it's resting just above the fret. You're only pushing it down a teeny bit to get it to the fret, but not far. If the action was way high, like if you look at where the strings are now, like I could pull the string up like that. If the string was way up here and you were trying to fret it, you'd have to push it that much further. So you have all this time it takes you to push down and then get back out. Where if the action's super low, you can just graze it right there and get it to sound and then move on to the next one.
So how do you bring the action up or down? Is that part of the intonation process?
Yep, exactly. It's actually right here. When we look at, let's see, this one? No, we'll go this one.
Yeah. When I saw you doing that one night, you were basically adjusting the action.
Mm-hmm. Yep, these individual saddles right here, each one has teeny tiny little hex openings, 2 of them, where you can raise the altitude of each of these individually. The middle strings are going to be a little bit higher, and the outer strings will be a little lower, but the lower needs to still be a little higher to compensate for the fact that it's so fast. Different instruments will look different, but on this bass, these individual saddles, you can see how they're also much differently positioned, where this one's way back here, and these are more towards the. This is to get the bass right, where you're playing open string at the 12th fret, and that should be the same exact note. But if they're not, that tells you that the intonations you need to either bring the. And we'll do a whole setup night one night, whether it's for bass or guitar, or we could do both, and start looking at
maintenance night.
How to do that.
Yeah,
stuff.
that's good for maintenance and setup. You just got a new instrument.
Also, the a lot of guitars sound like $1,000 guitar, and that's a lot of the same tricks or tips. Changing the setup or changing the action, making sure that the neck has the amount of give to it. That's another one that you'll look at. One of the first one.
And James just helped clear things up for me. Lower action means less range of motion between notes.
Yep. So
I understand.
Now, when you're looking,
more potential for speed. No wonder he knows.
Yeah. And again, with the high act, I ask, why would anybody ever want high act? And that's one where Cousin Jeff, as an example, when he plays bass, he likes high action, and I know exactly why. Like we talked about it. High action because it helps the notes back out as he's releasing. Would be my guess, but I've always been a fan of low action, but if you get too low on a bass, you get buzz, where if the neck just moves even a teeny bit from that. Again, whether it's a new instrument or whether it's just doing some things. Looks like we're having a connection issue there, but I think we're okay. We'll just have to see. It looks like I froze, but Tony's fine. There.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to try pulling that one off, and now it might be me. My Starlink starts to get cold right around this time.
Gotcha. Hey, what's up, Slither? String slamming down on that
gives me
magnet
good
too.
speed, but hey, Slither Joe. We were just talking about your playing technique.
Mm-hmm. There you go. And that's where sometimes people will do slap bass, for example, on a fretless, and you'll notice, look at the fret, the neck, you'll see where the neck is all kind of eaten up down towards the high frets, or where the high frets would be, because when they're doing slap stuff, the strings really are slapping down into the neck itself, whereas on a fretted bass, it's more slapping into the frets. They're made of metal, so it's not grinding away as much as it grinds away the wood on a fretless.
Oh, so that's actually a downside to a fretless, huh? Depending on your style, you could literally wear your neck down.
Yep, and it wouldn't be that it would cause problems, but like you would definitely see it
over time.
Yeah, you would definitely see it like in this area over here, like where I have frets all on here. So when you hear it slapping, that's the string hitting into the frets. But this very last little bit of fretboard here, if you hit a fretless, you'd start seeing like deterioration on the high end there. Not that you're usually not playing all the way up there, so but it will affect the look of the guitar. And again, it's not that it's a problem, but it's just that to me, I always like to make that I'm trying to help my instruments last as long as possible. So not having it eat away at the fretboard, I would think is a good thing. So I would do the slapping more on something like this, and use the fretless all for the sliding as opposed to the slapping.
Yeah, the fretless really does serve a certain kind of purpose in certain songs.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I love the sound of it, though. Like, there's times where, as I'm putting together my arrangements, I will use a fretless instead of a fretted, even though, like, the original song had a fretless part, but the fretless just has a nicer open tone.
Yeah. And there have been times where at rehearsals I've used, we have a 5-string at the studio, we have a fretless at the studio, we have just regular 4-string at the studio. I usually use the 5-string. And the 5-string is a little different than the one I have here. The one I have here is a Fender. The one we have at the studio is an ESP LTD, B15, I think it is. and it's actually got 24 frets, where this one only has 20.
Oh,
So it's got
big
four
dog.
more high frets. Four more high frets, but it's still the same size. Like the extra frets are just further into the body and closer together. So like if you were to try to get these big fingers like in those little tiny frets way up there, it's like it's getting down to be as thin as guitar frets at that point, or as close together, I should say. But I do like it, and it's got good tone. But we also have the fretless there that I would use for doing sliding pieces, like anytime that there's one of those. But sometimes, if you're not used to playing a fretless, and someone just hands you a fretless and you just start playing, if you're not really on top of hitting right at the frets when you go to hit a note, or fret a note, you're going to be off, and it's going to sound off. Like it's going to sound sharp on this one and flat on that one. Nothing's going to sound right. So you really have to be precise with where you're targeting those notes on a fretless. So you got to watch that. There was that one I was showing you at the studio that has the lines painted on it, so it looks like it has frets.
Yeah,
so
I
someone
think that's
tried
a
it at the
good
studio.
that's a good transitional fretless for somebody who's moving towards fretless. I think that's the best way to start.
Mm-hmm. It is, and that's the thing is that way you see the target areas. But again, if you're not really diligent about where you fret your notes, you got to fret right on that line. You got to hit it, and if you get the open strings in tune, and then somebody plays a note like an A at the 5th fret, when you go to play that, you got to make sure you're in exactly the right spot, because if you're a little flat or a little sharp, it's going to be all off, and that's where it really does come down to precision targeting and really careful ear, because sometimes people they'll just hit in the middle of that fret, and they're getting a D half sharp, and it's like, ooh, no, not that. You don't want to be halfway between the D and the D sharp when somebody else is playing a D.
No, that's the worst kind of note to hit.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to hit a wrong note, you don't want to hit a half step off.
This is a half of a half step sometimes, where it's a quarter step, and it's like, ugh. Because like now I can't the right note on mine. I have to bend to it is the other thing. Like that's one thing that you can do is if you find yourself, you're out of tune and you need to do something, to get your last note to land into, you're not about to, you can try to get to it that way, but that's a bit messy. You're better off just being well tuned when you go to start. Nice. Beyond Creation, fretless.
Jason
Technical
put his rig up?
No, Knight put his rig up. And I think he had put another one up earlier, which was his audio setup, yeah. Nice. Now, one of the things that we were going to go over
that's something we gotta do one night. Gear Whores is all about the rigs.
Break out all the stuff. Now, we were talking about the... this guy, the Line 6.
Oh, yeah.
Is the one that I use. I wouldn't necessarily use this on stage, but this is one of the ones that I would bring to like a jam or whatever if I was playing guitar, just because it does have the options.
That was made for stage, though. Those are pretty tough.
Yeah. I'm usually a player, not a guitar player, but if I were to play guitar, like I just grab that and go, because it pedal there could be volume, you could put in all the effects, you want delay, you want cabinet sims, you want all that kind of stuff. It's all in there, and it's easy access. What I do like about it is having the 4 stomp pedals. Basically, it's like having 4 individual tones.
That
this one's an
pedal.
AC/DC sound. Yeah,
that expression pedal on at the end, it's always useful to have.
Yeah, the whole thing was worth it for me just for that. But the whole thing was also, you have a whole bank of tones in there and all that. So they've got, it's not AC/DC tone, but it's the DC/AC tone, things like that. It's got Van Halen instead of Van Halen, that kind of thing where they, you get the idea of what the tone is.
Line 6, their tones do not suck. I mean, they have kind of taken over, where like in the 90s, it would have been a Digitech or a Boss. They kind of stole that market from them.
They also have them built into the amps a lot. Where at the Open Jam the other night, they had a Line 6 amp over on the side there that had plenty of stuff you could just dial in and get whatever tones you wanted to right there. And somebody else brought a guitar amp in, and he went and put it down, and it was like the exact same amp. So it's just like, this one just has stickers on it. Okay, the stickers make it better.
And how does it sound? If it sounds authentic, with some of these amp simulators and the IR that is going on nowadays. If you get the sound of what the original sounded like, especially for a fraction of the price, this is where we're at now. You can get a $1,000 amp in a free plugin.
Yeah, exactly. And when you go and buy something like this, or even the one that Mike had gotten at one point was just a very small Zoom box, but the Zoom box had the same idea where you could preload a bunch of different guitar tones into it and just use it as, okay, here's my lead tone, here's my main tone, here's when I want to do a super clean thing, or when I want to do a funky thing with whatever, a bunch of reverb or whatever. You can customize each of the tones that you're just, okay, now for this song I dial in 5B or whatever, and for this other song it's going to be 1A, and then this other song is 2C, whatever. And
Yeah, and with a pedal board,
each
with
of
a
them
with a pedal board like what you have, you could set up one tone for the first one, different tone for the second one. I mean, in a gig on a show, how many do you need to be able to bounce through that covers your whole set list?
That's the question: is what kind of set list are you playing? Because some people they'll play odd, and they'll turn around and play something from the '60s, like old school, whatever, and then they'll play Elvis, and then they'll play something from the 20s or whatever. Like they might go all over the map, and if they're going to be doing it like that, then they need access to a lot more tones. But at the same time, like I was saying for my buddy Joey, the way that he plays is it's all about the hands and about the equipment that you're using, not about the pedals. Like he has the pedals, but he pedals out. It's almost always just the guitar and his fingers and his attack and the amp, and he gets all the sounds that he needs for all the songs that we do and all the songs that you could possibly want to do, because we do hundreds of songs. I mean, we've done hundreds over the years very easily. He had a list of 150 songs that I started on when we first started playing together. He was able to hand me a list of 150 songs that he knew how to play on guitar as a start, and that's the songs that he knew 20, 30 years ago, and he's added a shitload more since then. So we're basically able to just pop into whatever, and he knows that he can just jump into something, and if I can hear what the progression is doing, then we just jump right into it and go. And if he wants a specific thing out of me that I'm not playing the right bass groove or whatever, he'll just start playing the notes on the guitar. I'll hear it, I'll just start matching what he's doing, and then he'll go off and do whatever else. Because now that I started the part that he wanted me to do, he'll just start soloing over.
And again, that's why it's nice. It's nice to play with people that you get comfortable with.
Yes.
The first time you jam, you're feeling each other out, you're figuring out each other's approaches. The 10th time you're jamming, you should just be like musically hugging each other.
Yep. And there's sometimes like our buddy Ryan, who was a guitar player, would talk about some of the jams that he would do with some of his jazz buddies, where they would just sit down and there's no discussion. There's no, okay, this is going to be a 1, 4, 6, whatever in the key of whatever. One of them just goes. And then everybody else just literally all falls right in, and they just go right into it because they know exactly what's coming, because they all know all these jazz tunes and they've had all that exposure, so they can just tell where the next person's going and just get there first, and just all of them are just right on board. So they don't even have to talk, and they just hours and hours of jamming.
And in any good band, there's always going to be the one in the band that's the instigator, the one who gets everybody else going and jamming.
Yep, and sometimes it's more than one. Sometimes it'll be, this groove got kicked off by the piano player, and then the next groove got kicked off by the guitar player, and then the next one happened to be the drummer, and then this one was the bass player. That's even better when it's coming from multiple places in the band, because everybody has their own input, their own stuff to add to the mix.
Well, and it can lead to a different type of jam. Like, if the bass player starts kicking everybody off, you might jam in a totally different way than if the guitar starts riffing, or the drummer's just coming in with a beat.
Yep, absolutely. And it does completely change sound, completely changes the groove. It can turn out however you like. And that's just a matter of what you're emphasizing.
If you're lucky enough to have like Robert Plant in your band, you can start with the singer. Hey, hey, mama, gonna make you move.
Yep. Or harmonica. Like he jumps into harmonica stuff sometimes too. Always fun. And we were talking some old classic Zeppelin the other day. We were talking the Rover. We were talking...
I finally got a chance to put that one together. That was that took me back, man. Physical Graffiti is an album that I need to revisit.
Yeah, that was the Rover, and I think we talked about Achilles' Last Stand. Also, those were two of the tracks that we put.
I am studying that one. That one's going to take a little longer, though. That's a complex piece.
It's got a lot to it, yeah, for sure.
But it's a great study. It's a great study in arrangement.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, I think we had something for vocal. Was it vocal EQing or vocal compression rules? That's
compression. This one was a new guy that I actually found. I was looking for one thing and ended up finding another. And you know how YouTube can be.
It can be a deep rabbit hole sometimes, for sure.
Yeah, hey, if you find something that you're looking for, doesn't matter if it's what you were looking for at that moment or something you can use later.
Yeah, because sometimes it'll be 2 years later. You're like, wait a minute. Oh, now it suddenly clicked what I watched 2 years ago. Like that's been happening a lot also. Like, something that I thought I, had a pretty good handle on, and you suddenly see deeper layers of what's going on.
Yeah, and
Deeper connections.
what I liked with this one is we're constantly talking about compression, in the back and rooms, and it was one of those things where it's like, wow, we're always talking about this, and he lays down some good foundational rules about how to think about compression.
Yeah.
Which sometimes is more important than which compressor you're using. You have 3 different compressors on BandLab. Which is the right one to use for what
In that
situation?
Moment. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's not that there's one right answer and the others are just crap. It's just in this situation I use this one, but in this situation I like that one better. Yeah.
Yeah, you could use any one of them for that situation, but you might not get the same results. And if you start thinking about what you're trying to accomplish, it makes it easier to decide, like, I need this type of compression.
Now, I'd mentioned to you at one point that for my bass tracks, I have one preset that I have, which is just the BL1176 compressor that they have in BandLab, and I have that dialed in.
That seems to be the most popular one.
Yeah, I have that one dialed in. I like the fact that it has a separate output gain, essentially, or so that I can dial back. Right? Like, let's say I put my track in, and it turns out that I'm 6 decibels too high. Rather than pulling the main volume slider back, I can just pull it back on the compressor and see what it sounds like with the pulled back there. And that way I can keep the volume at unity on the main track and still have it just sit right where it should volume-wise in the track. But I usually just do that to preview it also, because that way if I play slow parts or quiet parts, I should say, those will be brought out a little bit so I can hear more what's going on. If I have any technique fails, you hear any bad fret noise or sliding on the strings that you don't want to hear, because sometimes it adds to a song, but sometimes it's just noise and it's in the way, and you're just not playing clean at that point.
Yeah, compression should not add noise.
Yeah.
If it adds noise, it's not the compression I want to use.
Well, and it's not even that. It's more like a way of analyzing my playing. I can hear myself. It's like putting a spotlight on my playing. I can hear every little nuance of what I'm doing, and that way I can say, okay, that was clean enough where now I can just take the compressor back off and just have the track clean the way I usually leave it. Because I usually just do my tracks, just the bass going into the board, going into the computer, and that's it. So I don't usually put any effects on outside the computer, and I don't usually put any effects inside the computer until the project is ready to go somewhere. Because I just want to give them the cleanest track I can, and then if they want to add stuff to the bass track, then by all means, go for it. But I usually just have it where, here's the bass. If you want to do something to it, go for it, but you don't have to worry about, how am I going to get all this effect off of it in order to do something to it, because I don't put anything on in the first place.
Yes, you are a recording engineer's friend.
Yes. I've seen bad wet tracks that we've had to work around to try to fix, and it's like at that point it's like, well, can't we just re-record it? Was this like the only time that you could pull off that particular line, or could you just throw it on there, play along with it, and get a better recorded version of it now?
Yeah, and some people don't understand when I'm so anal about no wet tracks. I don't want to work on wet tracks. Yep. The truth is there's a lot of studios out there that will say the same thing to an artist, like, you need to come in and record that track for us this way, because we don't want to work with your wet track. We don't want to clean up your mess.
Yeah, because that's the thing, is they don't know how much thought or how much whatever went into your creation of your tone either. I mean, you might have just, I saw a YouTube video that said do this, this, and this, and I just threw it all at it, and there you go. You watch 5 videos and you mixed it all together, and that's not the way to do it.
And they'll make more exceptions, say, for a guitarist for their tone on a wet track.
Yeah.
When it comes to vocals, there's no excuse. Don't give me a vocal track with reverb. Gonna be putting reverb on there in the mix. I don't want your wet reverb convoluting my reverb in the mix.
And we have some folks who actually come into Zoom and we're hearing reverb on them in Zoom, and it's like,
stop.
What is that doing for us exactly? Like, you sound so amazing in Zoom. Like, why? It's like, we don't need that.
I mean, if it was a really gentle reverb, a small room type of thing, but the reverbs they turn on are like halls and plates
and sometimes they just don't work together, or they really, cause problems. They conflict. I mean, you can have conflicting reverbs. It's not pretty. You'll hear it and you'll know something's out, but you might not, if you don't know what's causing it. It's like, why does my track sound like crap? I have no idea. Well, you got reverb over here and you got reverb over there, and then you got a reverb on both of them that's not the same for any of the three, and they're all fighting against each other.
Yeah, and the effect noise might get drowned out in the mix. Like, you might not hear that reverb that was originally in that track when the whole mix is together, but it's still there. It's still making noise in the background, and even though you might not hear it consciously, if you start isolating and soloing your tracks and you listen to those individual tracks, you'll hear ringing and noise that is part of your mix. And if it's part of your mix, even if you can't hear it, it's stepping on levels and things and making it harder to mix.
Absolutely. And there's times where I've had people where they've got a little bit too much of effects. And sometimes it's the style of song. Like some songs have a whole lot of delay, reverb, that kind of thing on them. And you're listening to a song, though, and if you just...
Pink Floyd.
It's a Pink Floyd song. And like right in the middle, you can just hit stop or pause, and you'll hear that tail like go for like 10 seconds, even though you already stopped the track. It's like there shouldn't be any sound now, but now you're still hearing effect lingering on after that. It's like, okay, that's where maybe dial that effect. It's a good effect. It's a good sound, but maybe bring that all down 10% and see if it still lingers like that, or if it actually decays off a little bit faster. Like,
oh,
I
man,
would prefer it to. But
you should be listening while I'm mixing. One of the buses I use, the airy effect that I use, which helps for spatial enhancements. It has some delay and echo. That particular effect and that particular bus, it will continue to play that effect. When I hit stop, and it's not part of the mix, it's not part of the recording. It's just that plugin doesn't turn off just because I hit stop. And there's a constant every time I finish and I hit stop.
Now, that's something that I also noticed in the way that Jason works with Reaper, is that when you're looking at all of his individual tracks, you'll see almost always at the end of some of those, they have a sharp...
Yeah, he cleans up like his clips going in and going out. He doesn't leave any mixing stone unturned.
And it's super fast too. Like when he's, drag this over here, and sometimes the song is actually playing and he's moving parts around while it's playing. It blows my mind, because my machine would just be crapping itself before I even managed to move the first clip.
I just finally got a machine. Oh, this new one that I got this week.
RTX.
Finally, I can actually hit a note and my virtual synth plays at the same time. I can render in 2 minutes something that took me 15 minutes.
Oh, so it's even beyond 1-to-1 now. You were talking before how it was like 1-to-2 or whatever.
Oh, it's like 10-to-1.
Nice. Yeah, that RTX is no bullshit, huh?
Yeah, once I figure out how to route the audio with that VB meters so that I can get the Cakewalk stuff, next couple weeks, we're going to see some cool new things.
Yep. One thing is you're going old school with the routing. If you were to just play from this machine and then bring that signal in whichever way to get it into this machine, so that way it's now part of this, rather than being a program playing in this machine trying to get into the bus, because that's where you end up with the VB meters trying to get things.
Yeah. I thought about actually using because I have 3 different Behringer rack 16-channel analog mixers, and I have one that's not actually being used right now. I thought about taking all the machines and the audio that I would want to bring in, using that to kind of consolidate them, and then getting that one output into Zoom.
Yep. And that's the thing. Sometimes it's better to do it with the software at the VB, like you said. Sometimes it's, if you've got 15 machines lying around, you could have it play from this one and come in that way and then get it over
decision there. The compromise there is going to be analog. It's an analog mixer, so I have to get each sound signal. Nice clean cables, no hum. You know me. If I hear even slight bit of noise that I shouldn't have to hear, I don't want to go analog. All this stuff, all these instruments are all USB, and when I'm playing from Cakewalk, I mean, this is a digital signal. I don't want to go analog when I already have a digital signal if I can avoid it.
Yep. And like you said, I mean, you can introduce lots of issues. Like you were saying, just mentioning the hum, like that's unshielded cables, trying to take a main out if you're not using the right cables for it.
Yeah,
Oh, I've got a connector that fits here and a connector that fits there, so I can do this. And then there's
look at all these computers around here. An unshielded cable running around in my desk is going to be like, I feel hum all around me.
Exactly. It would have been a mess. But yeah, that's where you got to be careful with that stuff. And again, trying to simplify this. Like if things are a problem, then again, we've been doing troubleshooting for many, many, many years. So we both know, like, just instinctively, we generally simplify things down as best we can. Like bring it down to, like, okay, if you're doing signal path stuff where you're not getting anything out of your guitar, go back to, okay, from the guitar out this cable to here. Do I hear anything? Yes. Okay, now there. And step by step, you're moving down the chain. Yeah.
Walk through the signal path
rather than just assuming, oh, maybe it's this and blah. No. Oh, maybe it's that. No. Oh, and then just like, I don't know. You got to actually work your way through the chain, work through it logically. Okay, it works. Okay, now I know this cable works. So now I know this works, and you go step by step. See, there's the problem. That one wasn't done.
That's another one where Slither Joe has, like, truly experienced the challenge of walking through the signal chain. He's got the most complex signal chain that I've ever dealt with. And, 3 different loopers, a digital mixer here, an analog mixer in the middle of the chain, multiple guitars, basses, keyboards, all going through all of this signal chain. It's he's as close as I think he can possibly be to complete consolidation. It's a little bit of a mind fuck, though. Like, when something doesn't work or there is a hum, because like his 300 has a little bit of a hum to it whenever it's part of the signal chain, and we haven't deduced whether it's a cable or whether it's the plug itself, because he's tried different cables and he still gets the
to me
hum.
It was a level thing with the RC30, which is the smaller one, not the 300 that he has, but the smaller one.
Too much gain. Too much
basically
gain.
Yeah, and it's not that it's too much, it's that by default I just had them both at 100%. And it's just way too loud. Like if I plug my stuff in, it's just way too loud. So I have to bring them down to like 1% or 2%.
Oh, see, you shouldn't have to go to the 100 and 0 are not where you want to be. You want to find somewheres in the middle.
But that's the thing is, if I had the way that I have my signal chain set up now, you heard how loud my guitar was just playing my guitar. If I were to take the pedal and put it in that chain and just play through that, it would be way louder. So it's actually doing a lot of boost.
Gonna bring it up.
That's where he might be having an issue where he just needs to bring down the gain in the pedal itself to get that hum out. If it's always coming in there, like you just hook up the pedal and all of a sudden there's hum, then that's probably what it's coming in. Or the whole unshielded, bad or wrong power source, that whole thing too. You might be got too many things plugged in too many places. That's another bad one.
That's the next thing we'll have to look at. It's the 300. So I mean, the 30 and the 300 are, as far as like setting up their inputs, should be identical.
Go off camera to get it. Yeah, this is the 30.
Yeah,
so it
little
just
boy.
Has the 2 pedals, the 2 pedals, but these 2 volume sliders right here, like right now they're at like whatever 70% or 50%.
Yeah,
if those go too high, then you'll definitely have a whole lot. But what I loved about this, like as soon as I saw it, I was like, okay, that's all I needed to see. That picture. You show me the picture of the back. It's got the XLR in it. It's got quarter
and that XLR has phantom power. I mean, that's fucking useful.
Yeah. So this was like, I saw all those connections in the back and I was like, yeah, I need that. And it's, it's very solid. It's also got
and cheap as hell. I mean, as far as all their lines of loopers, that's a nice introductory into them.
Yep. And it runs on batteries. So you can take it with you, plug headphones into it and just do whatever you want, wherever you want. Another bonus. But yeah, that's where, for me, I don't really have a guitar pedal board per se. Like I have a couple of random pedals here and there, but nothing that I would use to like put together and cobble together a guitar pedal board out of. For me, if I were playing guitar somewhere, I would probably just be playing, clean, just the guitar going in, or I would be bringing my Line 6 and trying to utilize that. Like I said, I wouldn't normally want to use that one on stage, but again, I haven't really done many gigs where I'm playing guitar on stage unless I'm like playing bass as my main part for the gig, and then somebody wants me to play guitar for a song so they can play bass. We'll switch, and I'll just use their rig, so I don't have to worry about anything. It's just already, it's already set up, it's already hooked up, it's already good to go. Just, strap in and fire up.
It's nice to be able to switch up like that.
Yeah, with Pepe and the guys that we play out in Pennsylvania, we had a couple of gigs where we switched like 3 times in one gig, where like I went from bass in one song, and then Jeff came out from the keyboard to play the Santana leads on the guitar. And Pepe came over to the bass to play bass, and I went over to the keys to play for 2 or 3 songs. And I sang one while sang smooth while playing the keyboard, and then we also did Corazon Espinado, where I was playing on the keyboard. So it was fun, but that's where when the crowd, they see that and they're like, wait a minute. Cause as soon as we start playing again, it sounds like, a totally different bass feel and a totally different guitar feel. And they're like, what happened? And they look up and they see that, wait, wasn't that guy over there? And that guy was over there. And they're like, oh,
Hey, the crowd loves that kind of stuff.
yeah. And they're very surprised by it because, they were already like, wow, you guys are great, with whatever you're doing. And then all of a sudden you jump to a completely different instrument. And they're like, wait, you do that too? Like, what? How did you do that?
I'm Superman.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Oh, and NFD was mentioning the usefulness of free plugins these days.
Oh, God, yeah.
Definitely one night we are going to we're going to have a plug-in night too.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but
virtual gear whores.
yeah. But every year, 2023, the 10 best free VSTs in 2023 and the 10 best VSTs in 2022. You'll see all these kinds of videos on YouTube from all the sources you go to.
I watch all of them on YouTube from the channels that I like. If they do have a I like these plugins, I watch them on every one of our subscribe channels.
Yep. I want to say that the pedals that I had, the first pedal I got was the orange distortion pedal, which everybody says is literally the worst pedal that anybody could ever own, ever. And
well, and it's virtually the orange boxes, the orange amps, virtually some of the best amp simulated amps so far.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
If you like the tone of an original orange and you get the plug-in that amp sims it, you're going to feel like you have the original orange.
Now, the orange distortion pedal I'm talking about isn't made by Orange. It just happens to be the color orange.
Oh, you're talking about
it's a Boss pedal.
The Boss ones, yeah.
Yeah. The Boss pedal, the distortion pedal. And people are like, oh, it was distortion or overdrive? I think it was distortion. But yeah, the overdrive is yellow. But
yeah,
I have
these days I hear orange and
yeah.
Nowadays orange has become a guitar amp in my brain.
Yeah. And actually Joey has a big orange amp and he has a tiny little one. He's got one that's almost like you could fit it on your belt, like a super tiny little practice amp. But Joey's got everything. I mean, he's got Marshall stacks. He's got just all kinds of options. So when he's down there, it's okay, then we'll use this guitar and this amp and set that up. And then it's okay, what do you want to play? Okay, that guitar and that amp. And he's got the bass rig for me down there and all that.
He's tone shaping at that point.
Yeah. Yep. Robo flange, huh? There you go. Dark 80s dark wave. Nice.
So we're going to take a look at some compression philosophy. A new guy from Home Studio Corner at YouTube. And nice. I'll put the links up while it's playing, and I'll throw those in the chat. And you guys go check him out on YouTube. He's got some good stuff.
Very cool. Vocal EQ. Vocal compression.
Joe from Home Studio Corner. Today we're going to talk about 5 rules for compressing vocals. A couple of weeks ago I posted 3 rules for EQing vocals, and this is a follow-up to that, and wouldn't you know it, I'm wearing the same t-shirt. All right, let's dive in. Okay, I'm going to try to keep this video quick and snappy. So I'm going to tell you the rule, briefly explain the rule, and then show you the rule on a vocal. Deal? All right. Rule number 1, set the vocal level first. Okay, this may seem ridiculously obvious, but a lot of times we'll start working on a mix, putting plugins on something when the level isn't right yet. So take the vocal and move the volume, whether it's through the fader itself or adjusting the gain of the channel, however you want to do it, to where the vocal is at the level you want. It's okay if certain bits of the vocal are too loud or too quiet, but the overall level is right. The problem people run into is the vocal's too quiet, for example, and then they're trying to do all this compression tricks to it to get it more audible, when in reality they just needed to push the fader up. For this video, I'm using a vocal from my friend Whitney Winkler from an EP I produced a couple of years ago. Let's hit play. We'll rewind a little bit to hear the acoustic guitar leading into this vocal. Let's see where the vocal level is. She is like a blade of grass. So you can hear her, and so you would think, great, let's start adding compression. Actually, no, it's a little quiet. So what I'm going to do is use this trim control at the top of the channel to get her vocal up to, or maybe even a little bit above, the level of that acoustic guitar. She is like a blade of grass in an endless sea of green. How long till the others all forget? Okay, now that feels like the right level. We had to boost it a little over 4 decibels to get it to the right place for us to begin. Can you see how if that was 4 dB quieter, you'd have a lot harder time dialing in the compression? That's rule number 1. Rule number 2, EQ first if it needs it. I have this rule of thumb when it comes to EQ and compression order. If I like the sound of the track, I'll use compression first. If it needs some fixing, then I'll use EQ to fix whatever needs fixing, and then I will compress. Doesn't mean I always compress everything, but on vocals, I generally do. All right, let's listen to this vocal and let's decide if we like what we got.
She is like a blade of grass.
I dig it. If anything, there's a little bit of extra mid-range there because she's singing so softly, so I might EQ out some of the mids, but that's it.
She is like a blade of grass. She is like a blade of grass. She is like a blade of grass.
Reason for that is I know the compression is going to bring that out more, so I'm going to go ahead and take a little bit out here with EQ. That vocal feels great, so I'm ready to add the compression. Rule number 3, level match. This one's really simple. When you bypass the compressor on a vocal, it should stay at roughly the same level. You don't have to get super nerdy about measuring it, but just generally speaking, as you add compression and the compression turns it down, use the makeup gain on that same compressor to get it back up to the same level. But be careful that you don't go way louder with the compressor, so when I turn the compressor off, the vocal's quiet. When I turn it on, the vocal's louder, because we tend to think louder is better. It's just human nature, I think. So make sure that when you bypass the compressor, you're still getting roughly the same volume. That allows you to check to see if you're actually helping or hurting the vocal. All right, we're going to use just the regular old stock compressor in Studio One for this. Let's go 4:1 ratio. And let's just leave it at the default settings for now, and I'm just going to pull the threshold down to just start some compression happening.
She is like a blade of grass in an endless sea of green. She is like a blade of grass. She is like a blade of grass. She is like a blade of. She is like a blade of. She is like a blade of grass.
Okay, that before and after is very similar in volume. One trick, you can look at how much gain reduction is happening. That's the little light that was coming down, and it was around 6 to 9-ish dB. So when I was turning it up at about 7.5 dB, I kind of had a visual indication this might be right, and then I listen, of course, and just make sure we're still at roughly the same level. Rule number 4, use attack for aggression. There's a setting on most compressors called the attack setting, which tells the compressor how quickly does it clamp onto the signal. Does it do so instantly, or does it kind of slowly ramp up to compressing? The attack setting lets us determine that. For vocals, I like to use a faster attack. I tend to like a fairly aggressive amount of compression on the vocal. The sound of a compressed vocal that we're used to hearing in all of our favorite albums, generally, to my ear at least, that sounds like a compressor grabbing the vocal pretty quickly. And that's the sound of kind of a modern vocal. So if you find yourself using really slow attack times, maybe that's why your compression doesn't sound quite right. Let's listen to what happens when I take the attack from 100 milliseconds, which is fairly long, down to like 1 millisecond or shorter. That's the only thing I'm going to change. Here we go.
She is like a blade of grass. She is like a blade of grass. She is like a blade of grass.
You see what happened? It got quieter the faster the attack time, meaning there was more compression happening, meaning the very beginning of her phrases, more and more of those bits of those beginning phrases are getting squished down, and that's something that I like in a vocal. You can play around with it and see what you like, but that tends to be the sound that I'm going for. Rule number 5, adjust release for clarity. The release knob can be a little bit confusing. It's a counterpart to the attack knob, so the attack is how quickly the compressor latches on. The release is how quickly or how slowly it lets go, stopping the compression, right? And the only real way to start to understand how the release works is to spend some time playing with it. Dial in a setting with an attack setting that you like, and then move the release around to see what you get. What I found with vocals is as you go longer with the release, meaning a slower time back, you'll see the needle. It'll go like this. On the attack, it'll go wham. And then with the fast release, it goes, it comes right back. But on a slow release, it kind of goes, which means it's holding the volume down for a longer period of time. And if the release is too slow, that needle will just stay down the whole time. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means we're not really compressing the vocal. We're just kind of overall turning it down and leaving it down, which may not be what we want. Let me show you. Here's a really, really long release time, almost a full second.
She is like a blade of grass.
So that last, she stopped singing it took another like half a second before the thing stopped compressing. Not super helpful. Now, if we go really fast with the release, listen to what it sounds like.
She is like a blade of grass.
So what did you notice? I noticed that there's more clarity in her vocal when I use a faster release. What that means is, right now she's singing, she is like a blade of grass. Generally speaking, the compressor is going to compress the vowels and it's going to not compress as much the consonants. However, if we have a slow release where it's compressing and the release is taking its sweet time to get back up, then some of those consonant sounds between the vowels can get lost. Now, you could use that to your advantage. If you've got a vocalist that has really loud consonant sounds for some reason, maybe a slower release makes sense. But if you want to maintain clarity, which we tend to want to do, especially to make that vocal sit right on top of the mix like I like to have it, then I need probably a faster release time so I hear those consonants. Listen specifically to the consonants that she's singing. I'll start this one at about 100 milliseconds, then I'll pull it down to something faster. Listen to how much more clarity there is when we go with a faster release.
She is like a blade of grass. She is like a blade of grass.
Especially on the K sound and the word like. It almost disappeared in the first one and came back to life in the second one. And finally, a bonus rule. Don't be afraid to have a good amount of compression happening on the vocal. You don't have to have just like 2 and 3 dB of gain reduction. It can be 6 or 10 and still sound really great. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you have questions or you want to see more like this or suggestions for me, leave a comment. Pam and I both keep an eye on those. We watch those. We get feedback from you so we can make videos for you. It's a great, beautiful feedback loop, so let's keep that going. By the way, if you haven't signed up for my email newsletter, it is the place to be, and you can get my free 5-step mix guide just for signing up. So go to 5stepmix.com, get yourself one. Thanks for watching. See you next week.
Oh, gotta add that 5-step
Home Studio Corner.
mix.com to my favorites as well. Yeah. Yeah, good stuff.
Cool.
You know, like I said, general compression philosophy, but that's what you want to be thinking of before you start wondering which compressor to use. The difference in compressors is just more knobs, more complexity, but understanding what you're trying to do,
Yes.
and following
keep the objective in mind. Yes.
Yeah, and following a good step-by-step approach. Like his first tip seems so logical. Like level your track before you start adding effects to it. Get the track at the level that you want and do it in relation to something. I was talking about this to John the other night where I asked him, like, what track do you typically relate your other levels to? You know, is it going to is it going to be the bass track? Is it going to be the drum track? Once you've got that leveled, then everything starts to become a proportionate level to your first track.
Yep, and a lot of it depends on the style of music, where again, like a reggae thing is going to be a bass-heavy thing, so you're going to have a lot of bass in there, and usually you're going to want to focus that. But, you know, you might have something that's got congas, and if you have too much bass, you might not hear enough of the congas, so you have to kind of figure out what all the pieces in the song are going to be, and then figure out, not necessarily which one is the most dominant, because sometimes the most dominant one can still be, you know, in the mix with everything else, but something needs to step out in front in order to be, you know, heard. Like something like that vocal she was doing was very quiet in the style of the vocal, but the fact that it was able to pull out with both the release and the attack time were very good to look at. And that
Tip 3 and 4 both were related to the track he was dealing with and the quality of that track. Like a soft vocal track, different compression approach than say like a loud growling metal track. You're going to have different mentality for your compression there.
And that can help me, just the ones that he was using there specifically from the board that we use out in Pennsylvania is the Studio Live board. So that is using Studio One, and it's using Capture, and it has, I mean, it looks exactly like that. The plugin looks exactly like the compressor on the board itself. So on every channel on that 32 channel board, I can engage that compressor and start messing with, you know, individually on each one. Usually we're using it mostly for Capture at this point, where we're just trying to get everything in.
Did the DAW he was using look like Studio One? Because we were wondering about the DAW. It was Studio One? I thought it was Logic.
I thought he said at the beginning there that it was the default the default compressor in Studio One when I was walking away, and then when I came back, it looks exactly like the one on the Presonus board. So I assumed that's what it was. I could be mistaken though. We'd have to take a look.
Yeah, well, it looks like they're very similar to the
and the principles are the
logic
same
setup.
anyway. You know, there's going to be an attack, there's going to be a release, and there's going to be, you know, something showing you how much work it's doing when it's active. That's another key point, is when you put a compressor on, if you're not seeing that line coming down like that, then it's not actually doing anything. Like, it might be on there, but it's not actually affecting things.
Well, and that's where, like, his second tip, you know, by bringing the levels up, the effect of the compressor has more effect because the track is actually in the space where the compressor is doing its work. If you're a little quiet on your track and you have a compressor that's trying to do something in a certain range, you're not helping that compressor to do its job because you haven't put the levels where they need to be.
Yep. And Knight was just mentioning about putting in the mids for a bass track, because sometimes it doesn't cut through the mix in certain types of songs, and that's for sure. And in actually with the reggae style, if you look at the EQ sweep or scoop on the bass amp, a lot of times it looks like a big smile, where, you know, you're really boosted at the low end, you're really boosted at the high end, but the mids are all just scooped all the way out. So you're really hearing the booming down low, and then if you're doing articulate stuff up top or you're doing pops, you want that stuff to really jump out. So you have the high stuff out there, but you want the mids out to leave that room open for the rest of the band. And that's a good point there, because some people, if they just give you a bass track and it's the full register, the full sound of the bass track, it might be overpowering things. Or, like you said, it might need to cut through the mix, and it's not. It might just be too far down, or everything else is just too loud. And then, you know, you can try to get things, you know, more. And that's where, again, the levels, that came back to that first one again. Like, I've seen people, they say, hey, check out this song I just did, and they bring it up on, you know, in the Zoom or whatever, and there's, you know, 2 tracks are just pegging hard red. They're just immediately spiking plus 6 dB immediately on the track. And it's like, well, number one, very, very first thing is that comes down, you know, like that's, you know, get that down to where it's all happy. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it shouldn't be, you know, almost no signal, and it shouldn't be jacked all the way to the top. It should be something that looks well behaved. You know, it's in the range that it should be. And that way, if everybody's playing nice in the pool, then it all works out nice. But if somebody's splashing like crazy, then it's just overpowering everything in there.
And it's usually the drummer that's splashing like crazy.
It can be. And it might not even be the drummer's fault. It could be the fact that the person who's mixing the drums has it way cranked too much, you know, pushing it too far forward.
Or like he's mentioning, you know, with a lot of the metal tracks on BandLab, the bass you either don't hear, or the flip side is you hear too much of the bass. Bass is a finicky instrument to mix sometimes, especially in the metal world. Finding that sweet spot in the middle so that you hear it, but it's not overpowering like a bad hip hop song, you know, with subwoofer bass.
Sometimes you get guys though, with the metal especially, where just as a placeholder, they'll use their 7-string guitar and put in a bass part. And then when you're listening back to it, it actually sounds like a bass part. So like, I was invited to a band and like, oh yeah, go ahead and put stuff on anything. And I start listening to the tracks and it sounds like every single track already has bass on it. And I'm like, what's going on here? And it's because I guess they were using a 7-string and just so much was already in there that it sounded like there was already bass lines. And it's like, well, if I start putting bass lines on top of that, I have to either just, you know, dum, dum, dum. I have to keep it like really super simple because there's already so much going on with the bass and this guitar and that guitar and other stuff happening that, you know, there isn't room for another bass part. It would be like, okay, we can take that bass part out and put a new bass part in, but I don't want to just pull stuff out of people's songs. That's why, like, when I get invited to a band.
And bass is a much more difficult instrument to multi-part in a song. It's not like a guitar where you can see 3 or 4 layers of guitar to accomplish something. Unless you're Geddy Lee, very few bassists will actually like layer multiple bass lines and sound good doing it.
Watching Geddy play live is ridiculous, though. Just watching the fact that he can do those harmony lines, those vocal lines that he's doing while playing these, I mean, it's without looking at the bass. Like, he's not, like, you're watching him play and he's just like, what? Like, how is that even possible? Like, I'm starting to be able to do background vocals a little bit while I'm playing bass, but it really depends on the song and how much different the timing of what I'm playing is than the timing of what I'm singing. And that's why it's not the notes so much. It's not like, oh, I got to sing a G while I'm playing a C. It's more, if I have to play dum 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 while I'm trying to sing, it's like, that's not going to work because it's like the hands, I'm thinking about the notes I'm playing with the hands and I'm thinking about that melody line when I should be thinking about what I'm singing. But you just basically have to put the hands on autopilot and say, okay, I know that it's this one, root 3 5 3 1. Okay, I can go root 3 5 3 1 while I'm singing whatever I'm doing.
Yeah, you got to have that multitasking brain that can be thinking one thing with one side of the brain and playing a different instrument with the other. I'm sure that you can practice to get better at doing that. I'm not good at multitasking with my music. I can either play or I can sing, but I really have a tough time doing both. Same reason why I can't do drums, because drummers are sometimes like their feet are thinking one way, their hands are doing something else. They seem to be exceptional at the multitask playing.
And some of them are able to sing while playing drums, so they got the 4 limbs and they're singing.
Phil Collins.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing is, a lot of the bands that I work with, the drummers, they'll have either a headset like Tony's, where he's got the microphone right there, so he can just keep it flipped up for all the songs he's not singing, and then just pop it down, and when he's going to be singing in a particular song, or they'll have the mic way up top, and they'll just pull it down in front of them when they need it, either to sing, or the one guy I was using at the country band, he had the washboard, so it was like a metal washboard, and he plays it with wrenches, like crescent wrenches. Just playing like that, so he brings the microphone down for that as well. But yeah, I mean, trying to mix those parts. Now, my buddy Mike had a good suggestion for trying to get the singing and playing at the same time down, and that's slow everything down and make it one part. Like, if you have to cut the song to half speed or a quarter speed to get, okay, I hit this note, and then I sing this note, and then I hit this note, and I sing that note, and you can really break it down to that level, and then it's just a matter of increasing the speed. Like, once you actually have the parts mechanically locked in, then it's just a matter of speeding it up and getting it up to speed.
Yeah,
that can help.
And the slowing down to pick something up, it's a nice, humble approach. Never feel like you have to play something exactly at the speed that it's supposed to be played at. Otherwise, you're not getting it. Going slow and walking through it sometimes is the only way to get to the fast playing.
And the other thing is, don't be discouraged if you had to slow it way down, and after playing it a few times or a few days or a few weeks or whatever, and it's not really getting that much faster, just realize that it'll get a little bit faster, but then all of a sudden, it'll just jump. Like, it'll be locked in enough, and you've been playing it enough, and those, separates, again, muscle memory, like whether it's the parts, how they jive together, how everything works together. Once you get that together, the speed might suddenly jump, and you go from, I haven't been able to do anything, and I've been working on it for weeks, and all of a sudden the next day, boom, it all just makes sense and happens. So be ready for like the fast jumps in like that, like the epiphanies that we talked about before.
Yeah, and a lot of times, as far as me playing faster, when I'm playing by myself and trying it, I play like a turtle. Mm-hmm. When I am jamming with others, anytime that my speed improves and my playability improves there, it's usually because I'm now playing with other humans.
Yeah.
And they help me to play faster.
Yep. And that's the thing where sometimes I had people in the past that they would be trying to show me how to play a song. And so they say, okay, it's in G and then this, and like they're trying to walk you through the chord changes. But rather than just playing it at speed, they're just saying, okay, and they're not even hitting chords. They're just like, it's G, and then it's an A, and then it's a C, and then it's a D. They're just reading me a laundry list of things, and that doesn't do me any good. Like, if you could say instead, again, it's a 1 6 4 5 in the key of G. Well, now I'm locked in. Like, I know exactly what we're doing. But some people, they just read you a laundry list, and like, and then the other part, it's going to be G, and then D, and then A. And it's like, no, the other part is going to be the 4 and the 6 and the 5. Okay, good, fine.
That's how I prefer to be told. Tell me the key and tell me like 1 6 4 5. My brain's already programmed to do that really fast. Mm-hmm. But, if I do hear like A, F, E minor, it will settle in, but I have to walk through like each chord that they just told me.
Mm-hmm. Yep. The bigger problem I have with that, or the most compelling reason I think for me to use the numbers rather than the letters, is that we've been jamming before, and somebody will call that B, and I heard D, and somebody else heard C, and somebody else heard G, and it's like, okay, so everybody heard a totally different chord, but if somebody said
E,
4,
I heard E every time.
Every time. And that's the thing, is that everybody hears a different piece of that. So everybody went to a different chord, and we're all like, what? What did you say? And oh, I said B. Oh, I heard D. Oh, I heard E. Oh, I heard G. Well, yeah. If you said the 4, well, guess what? We all would have made it to the 4 because nothing else sounds like 4.
Yeah.
The 6, well, nothing else sounds like 6. So that's, to me, one of the most compelling reasons not to just call a random letter.
Actually, that's the best argument I've heard yet. The only thing I would add to that is I would say in music theory, that is how they speak. So if you do want to get better at music theory, you want to kind of think and speak that way because that's how all the theory out there will explain things. They don't really get into like the keys themselves. They will say this is in that key, but then they will show you Roman numerals.
And this might even be a good place to take a look at the progressions that Tony has in that in that little file he has there, where you have a 1 6 4 5, or you might have a 1 3 4, or you might have a 2 6 5 1. Like you can have whatever you want. But even just looking at the list of progressions, these are from one of the chord packs that you can get, and it's just a matter of looking at some of the common progressions. And like again, the 1 6 4 5 is one of the things that you'll hear all the time because it's just so common. As soon as you hear somebody play it, whether it's 1 5 6 4 or 1 6 4 5, there's a number of different ways to use those 4. And yeah, a chart, what keys are what numbers. Yeah, that's the thing is I always try to relate everything back to C, going back to a piano thinking. So to me, I'm just thinking, C major, and then I'm thinking the 1 through the 8, Oh, there we go. The progressions. Nice.
Let's see if I can, hopefully this computer handles it. It's first test.
Nice. And they call it the Nashville numbering system.
I still don't have the sound routing in yet. I can only go out my speakers, but you can let me know if it sounds okay. And like this first one, the first one we were talking about was a 1 5 4 6, which is the one we've been talking about now for weeks.
Yep.
It's the one every song is made of.
And this is coming through your Halion now, right?
Yes, I'm using the Halion sampler, and unfortunately, I can't show you guys that window.
That's okay.
But I'm basically using an acoustic guitar sound that's set to strum. Oh, do you see this?
That did come up, yeah.
Oh, you do. Awesome.
Because it's probably within the same window.
Yeah, interesting. It captures anything in the cakewalk window. So nice. the nice thing with the Halion sampler when it comes to the acoustic guitars is they've got a couple of different strummers, So depending on which one I use, I get different strums. I can also go down here. There's some one finger nylons that will do like arpeggiating, and when you're using it with these chord packs. That I use to set this up, it'll basically play out the arpeggio. So here I've got it to a certain strum, and let's see if we can take a listen to this.
Yep. Very cool.
So, that's that progression here. If I highlight it, you'll be able to see where you see these little notches, that is the entire, that's the repeat. Basically, I drop the progression down, nice thing with Cakewalk is you have this built-in library, and I grabbed my Unison pack, I threw it in the right folder, and with Cakewalk, if you go to the Explorer and you go to the MIDI library, this is where I put it. The Unison chord pack, if you're a musician and you are using Google, there's a good chance you've seen an ad for this because they bombard me with it. But it has everything, it has every key that you could possibly work in. And in those keys, here we'll go in, the, I built this whole project off of the C major, A minor
Yep.
progressions, and under the progressions, these are all the right now in this project the diatonic triads. So as far as the major progressions go, it's all the ones we're constantly talking about.
Yep.
Every song is practically made of most of these different progressions.
Yep. Those if it's 12, those 12 progressions might cover, 80, 90, who knows, percent of the stuff that you're listening to, like with minor exceptions for things like when people use borrowed chords and things like that would be things that'll take you outside of these standard ones, but these standard ones are a great place to start. Where especially, to me, this is all about songwriting, using these progressions, because you could just throw, that's 24 in that one file right there, where you've got 24 separate progressions, where just by soloing a track and hitting play, you can now jam over that progression and see what feels right. Like if you wanted to do a little melody line like we were doing a minute ago.
Yeah. Like right now, the sound, I just switched it to just the standard 12-string sound.
Yep.
These are the actual chords and just one run.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that's like a good intro, having it just start like that, and then you could get into the strum patterns or the arpeggiation, the broken chords, all of that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and then by changing it to one of the strums, here, I'll go to the arpeggiator that I was talking about.
Skinner, play Freebird.
I really like this one. The gently picking one is like instant folk song.
Oh yeah, that's nice.
But that's perfect for hearing it like, arpeggiated out like that.
Yep. And again, that's just one iteration, and then by just dragging, you could make that 4 minutes long, you could make it a minute long, you could do whatever you want.
Yeah, what I did is, I dragged it onto the timeline, and in Cakewalk, if you right-click over the clip and you turn on Groove Clip Looping, once Groove Clip, see how it's rounded now around the edges? Once Groove Clip Looping's on, you can just say, play this progression this many times.
Yep.
And that's very useful. Now, a lot of these progressions, most likely, you'd want to use a combination of like this one, and then this one, and then back to this one, and then back to this one. But even when you're just repeating them, you can hear like, hey, just these 4 chords. And now I have an intro to a song.
Yeah, not only that, but again, you're using these, and you can use this one, that one, put them all together. But again, even just taking the general structure as a placeholder, like you could do songwriting where you're throwing these in there and saying, okay, for that first verse, I'm just going to do, like you were doing with the dragging it, making it longer. Okay, I'm going to do a minute, let's say, of this, part, or 30 seconds, whatever, 30 seconds of this part, and then you grab another one and you audition and you say, oh, okay, I'm going to grab this one now with a different set of broken chords or whatever, put that in here, and you don't even have to leave these samples or loops in the final project. This could be more getting you started. It's getting the structure mapped out, and then you play your guitar along to those parts or whatever, or your keyboard if you want. So you don't even have to use these as the final product, but it's more to help you in the songwriting kind of Legos. You're just Lego blocking your way into a beginning of a song.
Yeah. This is the kind of Minecraft way of putting together progressions. So here, I've got 3 of them, a 1, 5, 6, 4. Nice. It's going to play 1 round, and then it's going to go to a 1, 3, 6, 4.
Now, is it lowercase 3, where it's
minor
3?
Yeah, minor 3. And then we're going to finish off with one of their big progressions, which uses a sus7.
Nice.
And this is one of those progressions where, it is 2 measures worth of chords. So that's why, it's twice as big as the other ones. But it does the same thing, basically, that these 2 are doing.
And if you wanted them all to be the same, you could just drag those top 2 to be double as long, and it would just go twice through, and then twice through, and then,
Yeah, if I wanted this to play 2 rounds and then go to this, As long as you have your snapping turned on,
Yep.
this
That's important. Yeah.
this is important, because when that's off,
Yeah.
it's a hot mess. But
It's a hot mess. There are times where you don't want snapping on, and there are times you do want snapping on. And this is one of those times you do want snapping on.
yeah, when you're
If you're
performing
trying to cut a
surgery,
particular individual note surgery, right?
yeah, when you're trying to do surgery and you're trying to align things and all that, sometimes you got to turn it off. Otherwise, you can't move something where you want it to.
Yep. I've had that happen, or it's pulling you. Like you're trying to, okay, I want to go right there, and you get there, and it goes, and it pulls you a little further, and you're like, no, and you go back,
Yeah,
and every time it keeps trying to snap you back.
If you're really anal, you can keep snapping always on and change what it snaps to. So right now, I'm snapping to the measure.
Yep, that's what I usually
just
do. Yeah.
because I'm dropping parts in. I want the measures to be precise. So that's always the most useful one. But if you do want to be able to go off time and things like that, you can snap in any increment down to 1/128. So you can pretty much keep snapping on and change what you snap to and accomplish just about everything.
Yeah. Another big thing for me that was a key point for doing surgery is zooming in. I zoom way the hell in if I'm trying to get something really lined up nice, because I can zoom into the point where one measure is the entire screen. And you can see the wave fronts, you can line things up to where they're literally perfect. And then, even if they're a little bit off, when you zoom back out, they're going to be lined up because you were so zoomed in when you looked at it.
And I'm kind of anal with that. I like to see the whole project when
me too.
I'm, thinking, what do I got to do? What do I got to fix? But as soon as I start working on something, I like to be able to, like here, I can literally see, the actual chord changes in the MIDI.
Yep, little wiggly lines. Yep, that's how far in you go.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, if I really wanted to be anal, I could even put little keyboards that actually show me. But if I want to see them, I go in, I view the MIDI events, and I can see exactly what notes are being used.
And to me, I just go with my ear.
Let's see how a 1-5-6-4 progresses to this second progression to this third progression.
Very cool.
That's not a bad combination. I would have more likely flipped these around. There's a few chords in there that I would change to my personal preferences, where the direction I want something like that to go. But overall, I mean, that is a universal approach.
Yeah. And again,
I think I would have changed some
brick.
of the inversion. I would have changed some of the inversion myself.
Yeah, but again, these are a good starting point and a good just Lego blocking things together, being able to throw together a progression and get something happening there. What kind of a beat you thinking about, Jaden? Trying to write a new song? For beats, a lot of times I'll just kind of audition the sounds of the guitars and everything to get the rhythm structure that I'm looking for, and then kind of build drums around that, depending if you want to start with that, or if you're trying to start with the beat, start with the drums. It's all depending on how you're trying to get things around.
Well, yeah, and trying to come up with a new beat is like trying to come up with a new theme for some lyrics.
One question is,
what mood are you in? Are you in the mood to dance, or are you in the mood to stomp?
And the question is, how loud is that?
Good.
And that's just the little buttons on the keyboard for being able to just do whatever with drums. But I think that's the other view there. This one. So yeah, it's just the little buttons up here. So you can kind of whatever you're trying to do.
From a drummer's perspective, bass snare. Would you say that that's the first thing a drummer typically is. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
the
a lot of times
difference
it's coming
between.
down to. Mhm. You can also have get 4 on the floor. Get that little extra one in there every now and then when you're getting that toms. So it's only 6 little buttons on this particular keyboard, and you know, you, little rhythms so that you can actually and simple. With the keyboards, there's also, I mean, this one has tons of built-in rhythm track, so you can start with whatever and get an idea for how to go with something. It's world pop, but I mean, they've got a whole bunch. Soul ballad, something like that. Pop shit.
Now listen to the variation. The variation on the bass snare between those different styles.
Pop ballad. Sounds like Aerosmith. Then pops. Sometimes a bigger finish. But if you're doing the chord, a lot of times I actually go with the big finish. Enough of that. But
The money shot.
The actual chord mode. Yep. When you go with the chord, that's where you do the. If you hit an actual note, it'll actually play its own entire thing. So it's like a whole.
Oh, rhythm's gonna get you.
Rhythm's gonna get you in the key of C. 16 beat. And that's the thing is, if I wanted to, like, let's say we were talking about the progressions, right? So like. Let's say we're doing a 1, 5, 6, 4. So that would be we're in C, then G, or G major, sorry, and then C, A minor, and then the F.
Oh, now right there, actually,
Is that A minor?
I heard some potential.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right there, that's cozy.
And laying back at that C feels real nice. Then G. Now this time we're going to go to the 4 and then the 6. So we'll go to the F first. And then we'll go to the A minor. Doesn't feel like it resolves as much. Then C is the end. I like for the last one to be the 5, and then the first one to be the 1. So if it's starting at the 1, we can use the 6 and the 4. And then, so we're gonna put the 4 like 1, 4, 4, 5. But in both cases, 5 is last and the 1 is first. So let's see. 1, 4, 6.
Oh, I recognize that one too.
And you'll recognize those, like those are some of the most common, like those types of progressions. But again, with that little list that he just had there, I could take that list and just by looking at, okay, 1, 4, 6, 5, and the other one you said was what, 1 minor 3.
The second one was a 1 minor 3 minor 6 major 4. 1, 3, 6, 4.
Then E minor. Then A minor. Then F. Back to the C. Big finish.
Man, that thing really is stuck in the 80s, huh? It sounds
Well,
like
for that
every
particular one.
80s song.
Now that's the question, is that's all like beat 1, 16 beat 1 or 2, but what if we said rave?
Oh,
Same thing, E minor.
now we're in the 90s.
Yep. Can hardly hear the key, but there's the F and then the C. Big finish. fade out. Nice. So that's on pretty even. We're 117 beats per minute here, but it's just you can go through all of it. It comes back. Sorry. Very nice.
That was a good finish for that one.
Yeah. And then like trying to move our way like either up or back. There's like groove and soul and disco if you wanted to go way back. Like here's some disco in C. Definitely got that driving thing going. For this one, we'll do let's see. We're gonna go with a 2-6-1-5. So we're gonna start with D minor. We'll go D minor, A minor, C, G. Big finish.
Oh, now it's disco.
Mm-hmm. They weren't messing around.
No, it started to sound like
funk,
disco towards the finale.
Yeah. Now funk in, let's say, with funk all the times you just do one key. So let's say like funk in E minor if we did, it would just be kind of doing. And you can just leave that run all day instead of doing an actual progression. Big finish. They are not funking around.
Well, and when you do funk in E, you are literally funk E.
That's right. And it's also one of the ones that makes it easiest to play. Like if you got somebody who's trying to learn how to play funk bass, if you're in E, that's that low string, play that open string, and then you're playing the 7th and 5th frets, and you can do all kinds of easy stuff and never have to go anywhere because it's just in E. E minor.
It's like playing bass on weed.
On weed. You ever see a funky groove on weed? Now, how about hard rock? How hard is hard rock going to be? And what kind of progression would lend itself well to a hard rock?
Oh, let's see if Casio knows what hard rock is.
Oh. What would they think of for a progression? They would do something simple, right? Like would they be doing 1-4-5?
We're not gonna take it. Twisted Sister.
In the key of G. We'll give it a try. There we go.
Oh no, that's Radar Love style.
A little bit more, yeah. That's just G and C at this point. And the hard rock finish. They put a solo in.
Oh, that's not hard rock.
Very true.
I mean, okay, a little bit, but
now the next two would be riff rock and heavy metal. I mean, how much do we think they know about that?
Okay,
Riff
how
rock,
many metalheads are we gonna get to approve of a Casio metal beat?
I'm gonna say 0. Because that's not metal.
Yeah.
It is Casio, so. But I don't think that it was really meant to be. Oh, but let's try.
Well, if you were to take those riffs though and actually run them through some different drum kits, slow them down or do some things to them, turning something into the actual like metal sound is more actually the sound massaging.
Yeah, absolutely. This would be riff rock in D.
That's not bad though.
And then E. Then back. And the finish. Riff rock, indeed.
Yeah, that's not a bad one.
And then heavy metal, we're going to say it's going to be drop. How far are we going to drop? Like drop A, right? Drop C, drop B, drop A. Go all the way down. We'll try A.
Oh, James likes B.
B? Okay, we'll go B major, B minor. B major. But it's going to be heavy metal, it's got to be minor, so we're going to go B minor. Hanging out there. B minor, actually, maybe from B minor to A major. Try that. Back and forth. B minor and A major. Then some G. And then the finish.
I like the riff.
Get some kick drum in there, sure.
Yeah, it's got some. Now, that'd be a nice hard rock category. Calling it metal.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
tough
Let's keep it in mind.
sell.
We have to
but-
translate for them. and they put heavy metal next to 50s rock. What?
Well, because that's the kind
These
of
two
mood
do
you go
not go
between.
And after that is twist. So you go from heavy metal to 50s rock to twist. It's like you're trying to break people's brains. But what do you think 50s rock would do? Like that's kind of, again, back to those 1645 or 1465, let's say. Let's try that one. Oh, no. We'll do the 1645. We'll do it that way. Try that. 50s rock. And G. And the climb ending. Just
Legit 50s rock.
exactly. But the twist is going to be much more twisty. Twisting beat. Now, one thing is,
So what would you say that's more like ragtime rock?
not really. Ragtime would be a little bit more syncopated, probably, but that does have a good. I mean, they're technically going to get your speed and everything else is trying to get you going back and forth like that, so it's not doing a whole lot. But for the progression, I definitely think like I'm trying to think, 60s, 50s, stuff like that for things that would have been. And then again, that 1645 is just timeless, so that could be like Eddie or any of those that use the 1, the 6, the 4, and the 5.
It's been there since the dawn of chord making.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And again, there's only 6 chords that we use a lot of the time. That 7th one, we don't like him. We don't like
Asshole.
him. But those 6 chords, we could use those.
I will
all
occasionally
day.
fit him in, but it's tricky.
Yeah, it's tricky to rock that rhyme for sure, and that's where getting that diminished, like James was talking about that, getting that 7 in there is something he's very used to, and that's good.
Yeah.
Whereas for us, again,
I think with guitarists, you guys have an easier time using some of that, especially if you're in the middle of like transition chords and slides and pinches. You can hit those, and it creates a sharp pitch shift.
Well, even just getting back to the shapes again, right? Like if we were talking before about the E shape, the movable E shape, and the movable A shape. Just with those 2 chords, I can do this movable E shape here. This is a G, but I can do G major, A minor, B minor, and then switch to the other claw, the C major, D major, A minor, and we don't want to do the 7, right? So we're just going to do those 6. But you'll notice that those first 6 in a major key, those first 6 chords, you're doing like the 3rd fret, 5th fret, 7th fret, 3rd, 5th fret. So it's just what we were talking about that other chart that I had up there where it was 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 5. Same thing. Those are the 6 chords, and that's where they start. So if you can remember that this one's major, then minor, you just pull that middle finger off, minor again, then you got a major with the other claw, which is just the 2 bar, and then another major here, and then a minor.
And that's all pretty much 3 strings worth of strings?
That's I'm using all 6 strings actually.
Oh,
Using everything from the fattest all the way to the bottom. Like this finger bars all of them, and then I'm selecting these 3 notes to make this claw, which is the movable E shape that we talked about in the cage system. And then this is a bar chord where I'm not playing the fattest string. I'm letting
I see. Yeah.
this finger kind of mute that one. Yeah, bar chords. Yep. So this is major, and then you put that middle finger in there. Now one thing is this minor shape here is the exact same here. You're just moving it a string down to go to a minor. So it changes, that claw changes from major to minor when you go down a string. But the minor on this string is the one without the middle finger on. But anyway, with just those, that's essentially 4 shapes now because you're using the E shape here, and then the minor E shape, the minor E shape, the major A shape, the major A shape, and the minor A shape. But with just those shapes, you can now, that's all 6 chords that you're literally ever going to use. So, I mean, you can use those all day long. Can I play Hotel California? Well, the one thing is if we tried to, we would have problems. Just because
it is the
Eagles
most hated song.
Yeah, that too.
Yes, the YouTube copyrights hate that song. You're not allowed to play it under any circumstance.
It's like walking into the guitar store and playing Stairway. You know, someone's just grab the neck and just be like, no, playing that here. But it is one of the songs that I do enjoy playing. If for me, a lot of times it's not so much being able to play all these songs just from memory and just play them all start to finish, but it's more you throw the song on and I'll drop right in. Like I'll be able to follow along and figure out all the chords and everything else just by listening and you know going along with it, because that's where the ear has come along to at this point for me. But like also for the picking, like I usually prefer not to use a pick and just use the fingers for stuff. So like when I'm doing chords, a lot of times I'll drum with the thumb or whatever. But if I wanted to play something fast, I might just use the thumb, just go up and down like that. But a lot of times I'll even just use all of the fingers. If I down with all the fingers, and then up with the thumb. So. Louder if I'm digging in like that. Patsy Cline, I would have to actually listen to. That's the kind of stuff where, again, getting out of
Crazy?
the comfort zone, that's one
Crazy.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
No. Patsy Cline, is that what they're asking for?
Patsy. That's the thing is, I'm terrible with titles as well, like song titles. It could be a song I played and heard a million times. I'm like, what the heck is the title of that song? If they don't use the title in the song, or it's not a big part of the chorus or whatever, I might not remember what the title is. But if I put a song on, I'd be able to just kind of follow along and figure out what. Like I like the minor 7 shape on the A string root, but it's one of the easiest chords to play on the E string root because you're literally just playing this entire bar with just this one other note there on the 5th string. That's your minor. That gives you the same notes as this shape. The top note sounds nice. But that's from a song called Spooky that I play a lot. Use those 2 chords back and forth for the most part. Some guitar, we do some bass, some theory, mix it up a little bit. I think we even have a little drum thing that we'd even do.
A little bit of it all.
Yep. This little drum video that we have here is it's a 2-minute thing, and it's kind of doesn't get into a whole lot. It's a video that we have here as well. It's one just to what I would like to try to do is just try to tap your hands along. Like it's going to be a sight reading exercise where we're going to see the sight reading, and you're going to hear him play, just individual drum notes, whether it's, and just different grooves, but see if you can get the timing of what's going on from the sheet music. Dotted notes, like a dotted quarter note, you hang on to longer. If you see the little flags connected, you're trying to do, whether it's quarter notes or eighth notes or, triplets, each of those. So it's kind of a little exercise to see how we do with rhythm. And this is helpful for reading rhythm notation. It's not exactly drum tab, which Tony was talking about the other day, where, you got all the different X's and hit here and then hit there. And it does kind of make sense when you really look at it and think of it in the way that you're trying to program.
I actually like seeing it drums and staff. I was checking his stuff out last night, and seeing drums and staff clicked right away for me.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to do this. This is a quick little 2-minute video. So we're going to do this and just try to, see if you can practice these 8 common rhythms. It'll just take about 2 minutes. And then, just a little bit of that. Not sure if my internet was chopping up a little there. I'm having a little bit issue on this end, so I'm not sure if you heard that.
Oh, no, it came through good there. Cool. And seeing it in staff, I could learn drums that way, especially if I'm just focusing on one, like a snare like that, and reading it as notes.
Yep. That's all it is. I mean, and that's, just trying to simplify it down and get to that point where you can look at it and read the timing from that. And it's not just for drums either, because all that same notation that you're looking at for timing, that relates to everything that you see in sheet music.
That helps just timing in general.
Yeah.
I was clicking on the that parts, like, okay, that's how you break it up.
Yep, exactly. And seeing, and even it was good the way the timing of the video, the way he had the page turn and get you to the next spot and all that. Like everything was, I liked everything about that, and the fact that it's nice and condensed, just a quick 2-minute thing, and you can just, just running through it, you can get an idea. And again, whether you're playing on an instrument or whether you're just tapping on your leg or whatever, makes no difference. It's just a matter of getting that rhythm, that feeling of the timing into your system, because then when you see those, in sheet music, you'll be able to react more appropriately to what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and that was that sight read drums, right?
Sight read drums, yep, exactly.
Yeah, I'll throw that link into our chat.
Nice.
There you go.
Sight read drums. And again, that was, straight to the point, nice and quick. I mean, that's the kind of videos I liked, and not a whole lot of flowery this or that, not a whole lot of, hey guys, whatever, just boom, here's the thing, this is how it is.
Yeah, and
nice and straightforward.
And looking at it from a totally different perspective, not just the drums and in sheet music, but as a keyboardist, looking at it from his perspective.
Yep.
I like seeing drummers do that on YouTube.
Yeah, the fact that it relates to every instrument as well. The fact that if you're playing a bass, same thing. You can see those same, rhythmic notations in your stuff that you're trying to learn, and this will make it easier for you to internalize that. Which again, I always recommend listening anyway. Whether you're good at learning by ear or not, I would always recommend it. Even if you're trying to go from paper to making music without actually hearing it, like I would recommend listening to it, even if it's disconnected. But if you're listening to it and looking at the music at the same time, that's even more helpful. Just like what we just did, where you're hearing it and you're seeing it, so you're kind of reinforcing both at the same time. Always fun.
That is some good stuff, man. Where does the time go?
I know, midnight already. What?
I know.
How did we get here so fast?
Oh, that was.
Were you speeding again?
That was some great stuff. I think that's how it got so fast. Like I soaked it all up like a sponge tonight.
Yep. And I'll get those charts over to Night Fights Day there. Again, those I'm not sure where I would even post those.
Well,
but for the most part, I can just send them to you in Bandlab chat for now.
If you get them all collected up, I can find a place to have a permanent post and say, like, here's a collection of useful charts.
Yeah,
we'll get those together.
Cool.
I got a folder on your drive. You got a folder on my drive.
Yeah, that's right. So we can get stuff back and forth. No problem. One of these days, we're going to go dig into, we'll have fun digging through the Dropbox. Because, again, I got recordings going back to 2014 there. And, we got videos from gigs and pictures from gigs and recordings from rehearsals and, everything from years and years of stuff. And I've started to get better about putting special notes in, like, this day we had so-and-so there, or this day we had a visit from whoever. Because, if it's not the usual crew that's getting together, it's good to know, not have to dig through 100 different recordings to find the one that you were looking for with that person.
Yeah.
But, getting better about the notes is good.
I'm about to go through 40 terabytes of spring cleaning.
Yeah, I mean, I got like 3 terabytes of recordings, and to me, that's a lot. So I'm like, it's already daunting at that point. I can't imagine having that much.
The Plex server, it builds up.
I bet, yeah. It sure does. I wish I had that kind of space. Like I said, I have like everything of mine is pretty much chock full at this point, everything local. I've got, 50 gigs free here and 100 gigs free there, but I don't have terabytes free anywhere.
It's funny how 100 gigs fills up fast these days, huh?
Yeah, and I mean, these charts aren't part of it because these charts are so small, like I just do these little, these are all very, very simple little cut and paste things that I'll do in Paint, and it's just old habits from doing that stuff for being in tech support and making like not necessarily manuals but little walkthroughs, like cut a screenshot of this screen, okay, and then here's the button, right here in the red circle, there, click there, and like send over a document to somebody so they can't mess it up because it's like, okay, here's a picture of what you're looking at, and here's the circle, and click on that button right there. You make it nice and easy for them. But sometimes it was walkthroughs too, for like full walkthroughs for creating accounts in Active Directory, doing things like that, creating domain accounts, creating mailboxes. I made documentation for all that just so that, if I'm not there one day and something has to get done, like somebody can actually get it done, because there are people who have the access who just didn't, they'd stopped doing that every day years ago, and I'd been doing it every day myself. So, they forgot how to do it essentially. So it's like, okay, here's how I do it step by step, screen by screen. Let me know how it goes for you. And usually I was there all the time anyway. But if I'm out,
nobody wants to do it. That's the kind of work they want to throw off on an IT lackey.
Well, in this case, I was the domain administrator, so it was all like we only had 2 guys in the domain.
That would be the guy.
Yeah, we had. The main network engineer, and then we had my buddy who was doing most of like mailbox migrations and server stuff and all that, and then I was the guy doing like the day-to-day create shares and backup tapes and Active Directory, all that good stuff. It was fun for small values of fun. No, just kidding. But it also
for the paycheck.
For the paycheck, yeah. But it also it was a unique environment, the last one I was working at, because it was both desktop support and network administration. So it's like I'm doing all the network administration stuff, but then you could also get somebody walk up and say, hey, I can't connect to the projector in the conference room, or hey, I need a mouse, or whatever. Like, it's, yeah, sure. So it still had the same interaction. That was one thing where in some places you're a domain administrator and you're just kind of locked away. Nobody ever interacts with you because you're in your own little silo, you're in your own little server room. But when you're a desktop guy, you're at everybody's desk all the time. So, I mean, I've worked in places with thousands of people there, and I knew every single person because I installed most of their machines, and I've worked on all their machines, and it's like I know every one of them. But then when you're a network administrator, you don't really know everybody the same way. So the desktop side of that job did kind of give me that access back, which is cool.
Yeah, it's nice to interact with the workers once in a while.
Yes, and not just on coffee breaks, which 10, 15 times a day. I drink a lot of coffee.
Well, there's a lot of you.
Yeah, and then they're small cups too. They little thimble. Yeah, okay, I'm gonna have another one now.
Small cups in a big man means many pots of coffee.
One of the funniest was just random story, but one day, I mean, I always used to show up with my coffee from wherever. This place, I think it was McDonald's at one point, like extra large coffee, right? And I come in the one day and they had no large cups. All they had was small cups. So I come in and I'm drinking from the cup, and this one girl I was working with, she sees, and like the cup is like, not even as big as like my hand. It's like a little, I can't even, it disappears entirely. Yeah, it's like
a little shot.
It's like the small little water cup you would have like a water cooler. It's like that size. And she's like, "What the hell?" I'm like, "I know." I'm like, "I needed like 5 of those just to get started." But yeah, I'm definitely a coffee guy, so I drink a lot of coffee. But that's part of the IT in me, so that's why we talk a lot of IT.
Well, that was a fun jam.
Yep.
Thank
Always
you all
pleasure.
for coming and visiting.
Yep. And
We'll
get
be
those,
back next Thursday.
Start getting those charts together.
SR tomorrow night, 9 o'clock.
Yep. That's right. We'll see you guys then. And signing off from Talking
IT.
Good night, everybody. Thanks for coming out.
Night, everyone.
Ambient noise, yeah.
So now you're grabbing some band lab clips.
Now for me, that would also be something where I would use like volume automation and like bring that from the bottom, like bring it in and then bring it back out.
And these are the kinds of sounds you can scratch. With this AI, like scratching it actually can be cool.
Oh, that was perfect for the interlude too.
Ends it right in the right
I
spot.
didn't even notice. 40. I didn't even realize the texture faded out at the interlude until it happened. I'm like, wait a minute.
Sometimes you just, it was just meant to be that way.
I love you, oh loves. Do you have those? Do you wanna share them with me? I love you, oh loves. Oh, do you have those? I like